Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Barbara Kendhammer. Todd Kendhammer and Barbara met when they were both 16. Todd confessed it was love at first sight. They became close friends and eventually started dating in 1989. 2 years later, they got married and began their life together in Wisconsin. They soon welcomed their daughter, Jessica, followed by their son, Jordan. Jessica shared that her mother often called her father a wild rabbit because he was always full of energy and constantly coming up with new and crazy ideas. Barbara wholeheartedly supported Todd in everything he did. They had a loving relationship and rarely argued. Barbara worked at the middle school cafeteria, while Todd was employed at a factory producing aluminum cans. Together, they took on side projects, buying and selling houses, while Todd also did glass repair work, fixing broken windows and car windshields. The family lived a comfortable life. In 2016, Todd and Barbara celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, and that same year, they became grandparents for the first time when their older daughter had a baby. However, 2016 would mark a dramatic turning point in their lives. On the morning of September 16, 2016, Todd and Barbara woke up early and got ready for work. Todd was driving Barbara to her job at the school cafeteria. Later that day, they planned to meet their children for dinner at a restaurant. Their son, Jordan, who lived with them while attending college, remembered hearing the garage door open as his parents left. He mentioned there were no disagreements or anything unusual between them that morning. At 7:45 a.m., Todd and Barbara stopped briefly at a neighbor's house, as they were keeping an eye on the home while the neighbor was away. After a few minutes, they got back into the car, but instead of heading toward Barbara's workplace, they drove in the opposite direction while traveling down a rural road. Tragedy struck at 8:05 a.m. Todd made an urgent call to emergency services, reporting that he and Barbara had been involved in a severe car accident on a countryside road near La Crosse, Wisconsin. According to Todd, a metal pipe had smashed through the car's windshield, striking Barbara, who was in the passenger seat. She suffered serious injuries to her head and neck when the police arrived at the scene. Todd explained that at first, he thought he saw a bird. However, at the last moment, he realized it was actually a metal pipe. According to Todd, the pipe had fallen from a passing truck and struck Barbara directly. The pipe, which caused fatal injuries, was approximately 135 meters long and weighed about 10 kilograms. Barbara was unconscious, but still breathing, and was rushed to the hospital. Todd, panicked and trembling, was covered in his wife's blood and overwhelmed with distress over her condition. At the hospital, neurosurgeons informed Todd that Barbara's condition was critical and her chances of survival were very low. Less than 24 hours later, in the early hours of September 17, Barbara Kendhammer passed away without. Her family decided to donate her organs to help other patients in need. However, the tragedy didn't end there. Police began to suspect that Todd might have been responsible for his wife's death. Investigators observed abrasions on Todd's hands and knuckles, along with scratches on his neck. They found inconsistencies in Todd's version of events. Police searched for the truck Todd claimed the pipe had fallen from and interviewed locals to determine if anyone had seen such a vehicle that day. They also reviewed security footage from cameras near the accident site. One camera captured Todd's car driving along the road at approximately 7:57 a.m., but no truck matching Todd's description was seen traveling in the opposite direction during that time frame. 4 days after the incident, a medical examiner performed an autopsy on Barbara's body. The autopsy revealed 3 lacerations on the back of her head. It was determined that Barbara died from blunt force trauma to the head and neck, which caused skull fractures, a fracture of the cricoid cartilage, and fatal brain damage. The cricoid cartilage, located at the base of the neck, can be fractured during strangulation. Barbara also had multiple scratches on her neck, a broken nose, a laceration on her forehead, and bruises across her body. Photos taken by police at the scene showed abrasions on Todd's hands and scratches on his neck and chest. Todd explained these injuries by claiming he got them while working with glass, as he often repaired broken windshields. However, a local construction worker who passed by the Kenhammers' car around 8 a.m. reported seeing no damage to the windshield or anyone near the vehicle. The car was parked on the roadside but appeared empty. Police theorized that Barbara might have tried to escape from her husband and hidden in the tall grass, with Todd pursuing her. On the morning of the incident, Barbara was scheduled to be at work by 8 a.m., but she never called her co-workers to inform them of any delays. She also failed to call her mother, a daily routine she followed every morning before going to work. Todd told investigators that he planned to craft a windshield for Justin Heim, a former co-worker. He claimed that, while driving Barbara to work, he decided to stop by Justin's house to deliver the windshield. When questioned, Todd was asked by police if he had called Justin before going to his house. Todd admitted he hadn't called, explaining that he was confident Justin would be home. However, when investigators spoke to Justin, they received a completely different account. Justin stated that he had never ordered a windshield from Todd. Further investigation revealed that Todd didn't even know where Justin lived. About a week after Barbara's death, the police asked Todd to come to the station, claiming they had developed leads about the trucks the pipe might have fallen from that day. Todd went to the station, but appeared confused during questioning. Frequently forgetting details, he explained that he was on sedatives, but hadn't taken them that day, which left him feeling overly anxious as the interrogation continued. Investigators began to suspect Todd was lying. Additionally, the medical examiner concluded that Barbara's death could not have been caused by a pipe collision. When pressed further by police about his actual destination that day, Todd changed his story. He claimed he had been heading to another friend's house instead of Justin's. Police later located this friend, who also confirmed that he had never requested a windshield or discussed it with Todd. After 3.5 hours of questioning, Todd was released. However, 3 months after Barbara's death, Todd was arrested in December 2017. Todd went to trial for Barbara's death, with most attendees showing their support for him. His daughter, Jessica, was convinced her father couldn't be responsible for her mother's death, but worried that the court might impose a severe sentence. Forensic expert Dr. Kathleen McCubbin testified that Barbara died from head and neck trauma caused by a blunt object. Todd's lawyer questioned this. Pointing to a large travel mug found on the car's passenger side floor, he suggested that the mug might have struck Barbara's face as she ducked to avoid the pipe, potentially causing her injuries. The condition of the car's windshield also became a key focus of the trial. Alongside the medical evidence, defense expert Mark Meshulam, who had over 30 years of experience in glass-related cases, supported Todd's account. He testified that the windshield exhibited 3 points of impact. One from Todd's fist hitting the glass, another from the pipe entering the windshield, and a third from Todd pulling the pipe out. However, police forensic experts disagreed, concluding that the windshield only displayed 2 external impacts, ruling out the possibility of the pipe hitting it twice. Jessica and Jordan strongly defended their father during the trial. They couldn't believe he would kill their mother and then call the police just 5 minutes later. Jordan argued that, had their father intended to harm Barbara, he wouldn't have staged a complicated pipe incident on a busy road, especially since he owned around 28 weapons stored in the basement on the witness stand. Todd insisted he had never physically harmed Barbara. He explained that he panicked during police questioning and gave inconsistent statements. He said, "When I watch the video, I see myself in it. But the person speaking doesn't feel like me. I wasn't in the right state of mind. I wasn't thinking about my actions or where I was going. My mind was only focused on Barbara." Todd Kendhammer was convicted of first-degree murder on December 15, 2017. During this hearing, Jessica and Jordan were stunned when Barbara's cousin spoke in court against Todd. The cousin read a letter signed by other family members. expressing their collective desire to protect Barbara and urging the court to impose the harshest punishment on Todd. Jessica disclosed that her mother and this cousin had a strained relationship and had stopped speaking to each other before her mother's death following the trial. Todd was forced to sell the house he and Barbara had lived in to cover legal expenses. In the end, the judge ruled that Todd was sentenced to life in prison and is eligible for parole after 30 years. Despite the initial ruling, Jessica and Jordan refused to give up and were determined to clear their father. In August 2021, 4 years after his conviction, Todd returned to court once again. He insisted on his innocence, claiming that Barbara's death was caused by a pipe accident. While the prosecution maintained that he had murdered her, Todd's attorney introduced a pathologist with experience in nearly 6 autopsies. After reviewing Barbara's medical records and photographs, doctor found no evidence of a struggle. Contradicting the original forensic expert's conclusions, she theorized that Barbara's cricoid cartilage injuries might have been caused by a blow from a large travel mug resting on her lap during the car ride. Regarding the wounds on the back of Barbara's head, doctors suggested that Barbara may have instinctively ducked in fear, causing the pipe to strike her. She concluded that Barbara's death was the result of a car accident. The defense also called forensic pathologist Dr. Kathleen. She described the case as complex and acknowledged that the original autopsy had been well executed, with reasonable conclusions. However, she explained that she would not have reached the same conclusions, agreeing with another pathologist for the defense. Dr. Kathleen stated that she did not believe Barbara was strangled. She added that in her extensive experience, she had never encountered a fractured cricoid cartilage in any strangulation case. To better understand what happened in the fatal incident, local authorities recreated Todd's account by conducting an experiment. They dropped a similar pipe from a truck bed to see if it could hit a car's windshield. Initially, Todd's attorneys dismissed the test as inconclusive, and the video of the experiment, conducted in 2017, was not introduced until 2021. The experiment showed that if a pipe bounced a certain way, as Todd described, it could hit the windshield in one of 4 attempts. The pipe hit the ground and bounced high enough to reach the windshield. Lending credibility to Todd's version of events, the attorneys also presented additional videos of similar accidents to demonstrate that Todd's case was not unusual. Although these other incidents did not involve fatalities, the vehicles were damaged by pipes in comparable ways. Ultimately, the jury was convinced that the testimony regarding strangulation was the most credible. Despite the defense's efforts to offer another explanation, in May 2022, the judge denied Todd Kenthammer's request for a new trial, but Todd intends to appeal the decision. Todd's daughter, Jessica, shared, "I used to get annoyed when Dad would constantly call me or invite himself over, but now I miss that so much. I miss my parents all the time." Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Julie Manugg. Julie Manugg was born on July 19, 1982, in Goshen, New York, a charming town where she was raised by her loving parents, Gerald Manugg and Sandra Barish Doper. She grew up with a sister, Allison Barati Corcoran, and a brother, Peter Gerald Manugg. Throughout her school years, Julie excelled academically at Monroe Woodbury schools, ultimately graduating from Monroe Woodbury High School. She continued her education at Orange County Community College, expanding her knowledge and embracing new experiences. After completing her education, Julie Manugg became a dedicated medical assistant at Coastal Obstetrics and Gynecology in Connecticut. Julie prioritized an active lifestyle, enjoying running and walking to stay energized. She had 2 sons, Nicholas Keith Turner and Sean Michael Turner. Although the details about her marriage and husband are unknown, she has a strong bond between her and her sons. Julie Manugg found love again in 2017 with Euan Anthony Dwit from Roxbury. Together, they welcomed a son, Luke Anthony Manugg, in 2019. However, their relationship eventually fell apart, causing them to divorce. In 2021, she moved into an apartment on Salem Walk in Milford with her sons, putting their happiness first. By 2022, Julie's eldest son, Nicholas, was 21 and had bravely served in the Coast Guard. Her middle son, Sean, was a 17-year-old high school senior. Luke, her youngest son with Euan, was 3 years old and brought joy to their household. Julie was 40, and life seemed to be going well for her and her 3 boys. However, tragedy struck her family. On the night of December 6, 2022, 17-year-old Sean Manugg was awoken by terrifying screams. At first, he thought the noise was an echo from the neighbor's house, but the crying became louder. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Sean rushed downstairs, concerned for his mother's safety. As he descended into the darkness, he caught a man wielding an axe, and his mother lying on the floor, covered in blood. Amidst the chaos, Sean heard the haunting words, "You didn't believe me," echoing in his mind. Sean quickly ran upstairs, locked his door, and called 911 to report the incident. He placed a chair behind the locked door and opened his window to seek help. Shortly after, he could hear the sound of sirens and people approaching. When he heard the police voice, he mistakenly thought there was an intruder, so he jumped out the window. The officers found the frightened teenager and ensured his safety. Meanwhile, police officers entered the kitchen and discovered Julie Manugg lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Her face and skull had severe cuts. A large axe was found on the stove, indicating the severity of the crime. In the living room, Julie's 3-year-old son Luke was found sitting on the couch, seemingly in shock. He was unresponsive, neither crying nor speaking. An officer stayed with Luke and provided comfort until more police officers arrived at the scene. Following Julie's tragic death, her body was taken to the medical examiner's office for a thorough examination. After a meticulous autopsy, the medical examiner determined that the cause of her death was the severe chopped wounds and impact injuries to her head, torso, and extremities. The detailed findings have provided vital evidence about the attack and the cause of her death. As the police took custody of the evidence they found on the gas stove, they conducted a thorough search of the area to look for any potential evidence that could lead them to the perpetrator. They searched every inch of the house, examining each room for any clues that could shed light on the crime. The investigation attracted the attention of concerned neighbors, who gathered nearby. They was eager to support the investigation in any way they could. A neighbor gave evidence with camera footage from outside his home at the Longmeadow complex. Police have investigated the footage, hoping it will provide vital clues. As they watched, they witnessed a person walking with an axe, closely matching the description Sean had provided. The police then began searching for the identity of the man with the axe. On December 6, 2022, a major breakthrough occurred when a woman called the police to report a phone call she received from her son. With a shaky voice, she shared the shocking revelation that her son had just told her that he had killed his girlfriend. The seriousness of her words prompted an immediate response from law enforcement. They quickly located the woman and engaged her in conversation. During the conversation, police discovered that the man responsible for the disturbing confession was Euan, a 42-year-old man who had previously been in a relationship with Julie. With this important information, the police made efforts to contact Euan. However, Euan abruptly hung up the call. To better understand Euan's background, the police investigated his history. Euan was born in 1979 in Roxbury. He had a wide range of interests and pursuits. A skilled athlete, he was passionate about ice hockey and even played in semi-professional leagues. Euan also holds a bachelor's degree in history from Siena College. Not satisfied with just one career, he also pursued a career as a firefighter, showing his ambition. In 2006, Euan DeWitt's life took a tumultuous turn when he was arrested in Connecticut for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. After pleading guilty, he was given a suspended prison sentence and placed on probation. However, Euan turned his life around in 2009 when he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps. Over the course of 5 years, he distinguished himself as a skilled weapons specialist and non-commissioned officer, ultimately earning the rank of Lance Corporal. During his time in the Marines, Euan served as a machine gunner and was part of the elite 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. A notable photo from his time in service shows him bravely operating a .50 caliber machine gun on a vehicle during a defense exercise. Euan's leadership skills and expertise helped him become captain of the machine gun section. Euan served multiple tours in combat zones, including Afghanistan and the Middle East, alongside his fellow Marines. His selfless dedication was highlighted in a 2015 article in the Registered Citizen. One notable incident occurred shortly after the birth of his son, when he was arrested for attacking Julie Manugg. According to reports, he threw a large object at her, destroying her phone and preventing her from calling for help. Fearing for her safety, Julie sought refuge at a neighbor's house and contacted the police. In addition, Euan, while intoxicated, getting into a heated argument with Julie and throwing a playpen at her head, causing a serious injury. Their son witnessed this incident and provided a statement. After Euan went to rehabilitation, Julie sought a restraining order to protect herself from his abusive behavior. The court granted her a protective order that allowed for limited contact. However, Euan was still granted visitation rights, which created ongoing concerns for Julie and her family's safety. In addition to their personal struggles, Julie and Euan became embroiled in a series of family court cases starting in 2021. Julie initiated proceedings by seeking child support for their son Luke. The court ruled in her favor in October 2021, ordering Euan to provide financial support. Euan retaliated by taking Julie to court seeking resolution on visitation rights. In an effort to mediate the situation, the court granted supervised visitation, with a further hearing scheduled for April 2023 to revisit the matter. Julie and Euan's divorce leads to many problems. Just 3 weeks before her death, Julie took action by going to Milford Police Station on November 14, 2022. She filed a complaint against Euan for allegedly sending her more than 200 text messages in just 2 days, violating a protective order prohibiting him from making contact. Officer Scott Nablin carefully collected evidence of the text messages from Julie Minogue's phone, which further strengthened the case against Euan. In a statement, Julie expressed deep concern for her safety and the well-being of her children. She stated that she could no longer tolerate the abuse and was seeking protection. Julie detailed the ongoing harassment she had endured and her fear of Euan's behavior. She mentioned that he had a history of trouble with drugs and alcohol and was worried that he might harm her. In the meantime, Julie Manugg sought a civil restraining order against Euan. On December 1, 2022, she presented evidence to a judge, including text messages, Euan's history of substance abuse and mental health issues, and his violent past. Julie expressed concern for Euan's well-being and emphasized the need for him to receive therapy. She believed Euan posed a threat to others and should not be allowed to interact with anyone until he received proper treatment. The judge granted Julie a no-contact restraining order on December 1, 2022, to protect her from Euan. The police investigation focused on Euan, and they thoroughly searched the area around the Salem Walk condominium. They also visited a dive bar on Ocean Avenue in West Haven, asking patrons for help and providing information about the ongoing investigation. They asked anyone who saw Euan to contact the authorities. Soon after, witnesses discovered someone resembling Euan. They immediately alerted the police, who then observed the suspect entering a food truck in a nearby parking lot. Police quickly surrounded the truck and apprehended Euan without any resistance. During the interrogation, Euan initially remained silent, but after hours of intense interrogation, he finally confessed to killing Julie with an axe. He admitted to entering her house through the kitchen window, hiding and waiting for her to arrive. When Julie entered the kitchen, Euan attacked her with an axe. Julie's son, Nicholas, witnessed the terrifying scene as he came downstairs. Frightened, Euan dropped the axe on the gas stove and fled. The details of the incident, as revealed by Euan, sent shockwaves through the investigation and provided a disturbing account of the events that occurred that night. During Euan's first court appearance on December 7, 2022, Assistant State's Attorney Alana Paul updated the judge on the case. She said that Euan confessed to the crime, but even if he did not, the evidence against him was compelling. Given the severity of the case, Paul argued that a significant sentence was necessary. Judge Odin Grogan set Euan DeWitt's bond at $5 million due to concerns about his history of ignoring court orders and the need to prioritize public safety. As a result, Euan was placed under surveillance. A hearing was scheduled for December 14, 2022, to further address the case. On December 14, 2022, Euan faced multiple charges, including murder, violating a protective order, violating a restraining order, risking injury to a minor, and reckless endangerment. These charges aim to hold Euan accountable for the full scope of his actions. A hearing for his pending cases was set for April 6, 2023. The family of the victim has released a statement, vowing to take action and hold accountable those who failed to protect their loved one. They hope that this case will lead to improved safeguards for individuals experiencing domestic violence and abuse. The family is committed to creating positive change and preventing similar tragedies from happening in the future. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Scott Ponder. Scott Dean Ponder was born on February 7, 1973, to a loving family. His mother, Beverly Guy, and stepfather, Terry Guy, encouraged his passion for cars and motorcycles from a young age. They supported his development as a rider and even helped him obtain a racing license as soon as he was eligible. Scott's talent and dedication earned him recognition, including numerous admirers and local hero status in Chesney. Scott was a sociable person who enjoyed spending time with many people, and they enjoyed his company as well. In the late 1990s, Scott started repairing bikes in his grandmother's backyard, which eventually led to the establishment of Superbike Motorsports. The business expanded to a one-garage building in 2001, and Scott brought in his best friend, Brian Lucas, as a partner. They partnered to obtain a Suzuki dealership, resulting in swift expansion and achievement. Brian, who initially worked part-time when the business first started, left his job to become the store's full-time manager. Through their dedication and expertise, the duo attracted numerous customers, and the business began to flourish. Despite being salesmen, they prioritized educating their customers about bikes and racing. Scott's mother, Beverly Guy, who initially visited the store occasionally, began to visit regularly and eventually took on responsibilities such as accounting, payroll, and cash management. With the trio's combined efforts, the business thrived, selling 100,000 motorbikes every month. Scott attended an industry convention in Chicago, where he met his future wife, Melissa Brackman, a former homecoming queen from Stafford High School. They instantly connected and enjoyed each other's company, leading to frequent meetups as their relationship deepened. Eventually, they decided to get married, and their love life, both before and after the wedding, resembled a fairy tale, with their love growing stronger each day. I met Scott at a motorcycle show in Indianapolis, where he struck me as a kind and charming Southern gentleman. My feelings for him developed rapidly, and I soon realized I was in love with him. Scott and I decided to start a family, but we struggled to conceive. We sought medical help, and after months of trying, I finally became pregnant with a baby boy. In October 2003, I discovered I was pregnant while visiting my hometown. I took a pregnancy test at my brother's house without telling anyone, and I was overjoyed when the test was positive. Scott was thrilled when I shared the news with him. Around the same time, Scott's business was booming, with millions of dollars in sales in the first year. To keep up with the demand, he expanded his store and hired a new mechanic, Chris Sherbet. Chris was well known in town for his exceptional wrench skills, which caught Scott's attention. Scott, Beverly, Brian, and Chris formed a talented team that gained recognition beyond their small town of Chesney. Scott Ponder's life was going smoothly until disaster struck. November 6, 2003, was a sunny day, but the atmosphere at Superbike Motorsports was vastly different. You might remember where you were on that day. I recall it clearly. I had spoken to Scott around 2:15 p.m., and our conversation was brief and normal. He said goodbye, and that was the last time we spoke. Scott and the others began their day at the shop as usual. The store had a few customers browsing, including Kelly Sisk and his 4-year-old son. Kelly was there to purchase a go-kart for his family, and after completing the transaction, he lingered in the shop for a bit. Brian was supposed to be on holiday with his family, but Scott called him in to address a customer complaint about a neglected bike. Brian arrived at the shop and immediately started working on the bike. Meanwhile, Scott was helping another customer when his mother, Beverly, stopped by. She had just taken Scott's cancer-stricken grandmother to chemotherapy and was planning to deposit money into Scott's account at the bank later that day, around 2:30 p.m. Beverly lent a hand to Scott at the counter, assisting him with his tasks. Scott's friend Noel called the Superbike Motorsports shop, also known as the shop. Beverly answered the phone and agreed to let Noel stop by, which he said would take only 7 minutes. After hanging up, Beverly went to use the bathroom. Within those 7 minutes, a tragic event unfolded. Scott, Brian, Beverly, and Chris, the 4 people present at the shop, were brutally shot and killed. The shooting occurred at 3 p.m. inside the Superbike Motorsports premises. When Scott's friend Noel arrived, he found Scott and Brian lying motionless at the front of the shop. Initially, Noel thought they were playing a prank and even kicked them, telling them to stop joking around. However, upon seeing the pool of blood beneath their bodies, he quickly realized the gravity of the situation and called 911. Noel reported the incident to the emergency operator, stating that everyone at the shop had been shot and was lying in a pool of blood, including his mom, the mechanic, and the owner. The police and paramedics rushed to the scene, as this was the first quadruple murder in the small town of Chesney. The news spread rapidly, drawing not only the victims' families but also a crowd of onlookers to the crime scene. The police launched an immediate investigation and began collecting evidence at the crime scene. They discovered Chris's body at the back of the shop, positioned as if he had been working on a bike just before being killed. Beverly's body was found inside the shop, near the bathroom, suggesting she was ambushed as she exited. The bodies of Brian and Scott were located at the front of the store, with Brian's closer to the door and Scott's closer to a parked car. It appeared that both men had attempted to flee after hearing gunshots and encountering the shooter, but were unsuccessful. A thorough search of the crime scene by the police and forensic team yielded blood samples and other evidence. The killings were determined to be an execution-style homicide, with the shooter intentionally targeting the victims and shooting them at close range in the chest and head. Melissa, Scott's wife, received a call about the shooting and rushed to the scene. Detectives launched a thorough investigation and quickly found their first lead. Several passers-by reported seeing a couple lingering near the shop around the time of the murder. The detectives created sketches of the suspects based on the eyewitnesses' descriptions and distributed the pictures throughout South Carolina. The detectives initially suspected that the man and they was the shooter, and that he had attacked Chris and Beverly from behind while she distracted Scott and Brian at the front of the shop. However, this was only a theory, and no concrete evidence supported it. Despite months of searching, the police were unable to find any new leads. As media coverage intensified, detectives re-examined the case from a different angle, which ultimately led to a breakthrough. The detectives began to scrutinize the victims' pasts and lifestyles. While Scott, Beverly, and Brian appeared to be clean, Chris, the mechanic, had a more complex background. During the investigation, detectives discovered that Chris had previously worked for a company with ties to the drug trade. It was also revealed that Chris may have been involved in smuggling and was set to appear in court the following Monday, prior to the murders. In 2003, the police were actively working to combat a growing drug problem, particularly among young people. With Chris's connection to the drug trade now apparent, detectives and the public began to question whether the motive behind the quadruple homicide was to kill Chris specifically, with the other victims being unintentional casualties. It was also speculated that Chris's scheduled court appearance may have been a motive for his murder, as those involved in the drug business may have believed he would testify against them. Although this theory seemed plausible, particularly given that Chris was the first to be shot, there was no concrete evidence to support it. As a result, the investigation once again stalled. The case remained unsolved for an entire year, until the detectives decided to approach it from a fresh perspective. The detectives discovered that Brian, a friend and co-worker of Scott's, had been searching for a new house weeks before the murder. However, his wife Robin claimed to have had no knowledge of this decision. This revelation raised suspicions about the state of their marriage. Brian's mother, Lorraine Lucas, later revealed that their marriage was unhappy and strained, and that Brian had been planning to leave Robin to live alone. Lorraine recalled a tense encounter between Brian and Robin, during which Robin made faces behind Brian's back, leading to a confrontation when Brian asked her to treat his mother with respect. While this incident may not have seemed directly related to the shooting at first, it would later become a crucial piece of the puzzle. The quadruple murder was a catastrophic event that left the families of the 4 victims deeply traumatized and devastated. Melissa, in particular, struggled to cope with the loss of her beloved husband. Her life was once flawless, but a devastating event changed everything, leaving her to put the shattered remains back together. Despite her grief, Melissa found the strength to carry on for the sake of her newborn son, Scott Ponder Jr., who was born in June 2004. The police continued to call on Melissa for questioning, but she remained strong for her child's sake. In a surprising turn of events, the police obtained a DNA sample from Scott Ponder Jr.'s diaper, which was collected after Melissa had changed him at the station. The results of the DNA test shocked everyone, revealing that Ponder Jr.'s DNA matched Brian's, not Scott's. This discovery sparked tension between Melissa and her father-in-law, William Ponder, who repeatedly questioned her about the truth. Melissa was told that the detectives believed they had evidence linking her to the crime, and she was given a clear warning: if the proof implicated her, they would come for her wherever she was. As the investigation continued, the detectives began to focus on a possible love triangle between Scott, Melissa, and Brian. Rumors about Melissa's infidelity soon spread throughout the neighborhood, further complicating the case. Brian's mother considered the possibility of him having an affair due to his unhappiness in marriage and the thought of divorce. However, Melissa consistently denied any involvement with Brian and affirmed Scott Ponder child's paternity, stating that she and Scott Ponder had struggled to conceive. Melissa was certain that the child belonged to her and Scott, and she remained convinced even after being questioned multiple times. For a year and a half, detectives monitored Melissa's every move, searching for a lead. Then, after 18 months, they revealed a startling discovery: the blood sample collected from the crime scene contained an error. A DNA test showed a match between Brian and Beverly's DNA, which should not be the case since Scott, was Beverly's son, not Brian. Realizing their mistake, detectives understood that the blood samples from Scott and Brian had been mislabeled due to their close proximity at the crime scene. The discovery cleared Melissa's name regarding the love triangle theory, and detectives began to investigate a connection between the Superbike Motorsports homicide and another murder that occurred just 30 meters away, 5 months earlier. On May 16, 2003, a triple homicide shook the town of Greer, South Carolina. The incident took place at the Blue Ridge Savings Bank, where Sylvia Holtzclaw was due to start her shift. However, a local couple, Dee and Maggie Barnes, visited the bank at around 1:30 p.m. A 911 call was made to the Greer Police Department, reporting a shooting at the bank. Unfortunately, Sylvia, Dee, and Maggie were found shot to death. The Greer Police Department received a distress call from the Blue Ridge Savings Bank. One of the responding officers described the scene, noting that they were among the first to arrive. Like the Superbike Motorsports incident, the shooting occurred in broad daylight with no witnesses present. After reviewing the CCTV footage, police observed a red car driving towards the bank at 1:24 p.m. and leaving 3 minutes after the incident. A red car was spotted driving to a bank on Frontage Road at 1:24 p.m. 3 minutes later, the Barnes family was seen driving in the same area. Coincidentally, a similar red car was seen at the scene of a quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports. Detectives began searching for the red car and discovered it had been stolen from a rental lot by 39-year-old Emerson Wright days before the homicide. Police believed Emerson had entered the bank to rob it, but panicked and shot a couple who tried to intervene. However, detectives were unable to question Emerson about the bank and Superbike Motorsports murders due to a series of events that unfolded 2 years later. Emerson was wanted for a string of burglaries in the Atlanta area when he was chased by a state trooper. He crashed his car, got out, and shot himself in the head with a single gunshot wound. Although detectives noted similarities between their cases, they did not believe they were connected. The quadruple homicide at Superbike Motorsports in 2003 went cold just months later, leaving the victims' families, including Melissa, without any answers for 13 long years. Despite the lack of progress, Melissa and the other families of the victims refused to give up, tirelessly searching for any lead that might uncover the truth behind the gruesome crime. Unfortunately, their efforts yielded nothing. However, in 2016, the case was reopened after detectives made a breakthrough. This development brought new hope to the families, 13 years after the crime had taken place. The man behind the quadruple murder finally emerged when he was arrested for an unrelated crime. During his interrogation, he confessed to the Superbike Motorsports murders. The killer was 45-year-old Todd Kohlhepp, born on March 7, 1971, to parents Reggie and William. After his parents' divorce when he was just 2 years old, Todd began living with his mother and her new partner, but he often sought to spend more time with his biological father. Todd's behavior was extremely aggressive and volatile, particularly when he was young. He struggled with controlling his anger, which often led to violent outbursts. During his time in nursery school, he killed a goldfish with bleach and shot a dog with a BB gun. Despite spending 3.5 months in a psychiatric hospital in Georgia, his behavior showed no signs of improvement. As a last resort, his mother, Ray G., sent him to live with his father, William, in the hopes that a change of environment would help him manage his behavior. However, this change had little effect. At the age of 15, Todd planned and executed the kidnapping of 14-year-old Christy Granado in Tempe, Arizona, on November 25, 1986. Todd knocked on Christy's door, threatened her with a .22 caliber revolver, and forced her to follow him to his home. Once there, he tied her up, taped her mouth shut, and assaulted her. After the assault, he walked her home and threatened to kill her entire family if she told anyone about the incident. However, Christie confided in her parents, who immediately called 911. As a result, Todd was charged with kidnapping, sexual assault, and committing a dangerous crime against children. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to the kidnapping charge, and the other charges were dropped. Todd was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was required to register as a sex offender. When Todd was released, he was a reformed person and he turned over a new leaf, started his own business, and even got a job. For a long time, there were no more complaints filed against him. However, in 2016, a disturbing incident occurred. On August 31, 2016, 30-year-old Carla Brown and her 32-year-old boyfriend, Charlie David Carver, went missing after they were last seen visiting Todd's house to remove brush from one of his properties. Investigations led to a horrific discovery on November 3, 2016, when Carla was found chained to a wall inside a metal storage container on Todd's property. Further investigations uncovered the body of Charlie, which had multiple gunshot wounds. Carla reported to detectives that Todd had shot Charlie and kept her captive, regularly assaulting her brutally and threatening her not to try to escape. Todd was arrested and taken in for questioning. During the interrogation, he confessed to being the one responsible for a shooting that occurred at Superbike Motorsports 13 years earlier. On November 5, 2016, Todd was brought in for questioning and recounted the events of November 6, 2003, in a matter-of-fact way, without showing any signs of fear or guilt. According to Todd, on November 6, 2003, he bought a Suzuki GSX-R 750 from Superbike Motorsports, but soon realized he couldn't ride it due to his lack of experience. He decided to exchange the bike for a more beginner-friendly model. However, this exchange didn't happen on the same day. Todd told the detectives that his friends Scott and Brian teased him about his inability to ride the bike. After the bike theft, which occurred 14 days after the purchase, Todd filed a police report, but the bike was never recovered. Adding to his frustration, the police officer handling the case made fun of him, and neither the police nor the shop contacted him about the stolen bike or the $1,000 insurance deposit he had lost. Todd began attending college at Greenville Tech, but his interest in bikes never waned. He found himself returning to Superbike Motorsports, where he had previously shopped. However, his interactions with two employees, Scott and Chris, turned negative. According to Todd, they would mock and laugh at him whenever he visited the shop. One day, Todd decided to take revenge on they men. He waited until the shop was empty, except for Scott, Chris, Beverly, and himself. Then, he shot and killed the 4 people he had encountered. Todd later claimed that Beverly was not his intended target, but rather an innocent bystander who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victims' families finally found some closure and justice after 13 years, thanks to Todd's confession. In addition to the killings at Superbike Motorsports, Todd confessed to murdering Johnny, Joe, and Megan Lee Coxey, and Charlie David Carver, all of whom died from gunshot wounds. Despite being a serial killer, Todd did not face a trial. Instead, prosecutors negotiated a plea deal with him after consulting with the victims' families and a survivor. As part of the deal, the state offered Todd a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole, which he accepted just 7 months after his arrest. Todd was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences on May 23, 2017. In addition to these life sentences, he received 30 years for assault and 30 years for kidnapping. However, the fact that Todd pleaded guilty without a trial left many, including the victims' families, feeling that justice had not been fully served. The case also outraged the general public, who felt that the long wait for justice was unfair. Seventh Circuit Solicitor Barry Barnett expressed the frustration felt by many, stating that families should not have to wait years for justice. However, for Melissa, the wife of victim Scott Ponder, the sentencing brought a sense of relief and closure. She and other family members of the victims came together to hold a vigil in memory of their loved ones. After 13 years of pain and suffering, the victims' families finally had the answers they had been seeking about what had happened to their loved ones. In an interview, Melissa expressed her skepticism about Todd's motive for the murders, stating that she did not believe that her husband would have behaved in a way that would have provoked Todd. She recalled the kindness and good humor of Scott and another victim, Brian, and found it hard to believe that Todd's claims about their behavior were true. While Melissa was grateful that justice had been served, she felt that Todd's lack of remorse and casual demeanor during the investigation and court proceedings were disturbing. Many members of the public felt that Todd's crimes were so heinous that he deserved the death penalty. Todd's actions were heinous, and his lack of remorse is shocking. During the interrogation, he spoke about the murders in a casual, matter-of-fact way, as if recalling a past memory. This was truly despicable. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, in Puerto Rico, to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz. She was one of 3 children, and her early life was marked by a significant loss when her mother passed away. It was during this time that Maria met Joel Pellet, who was 11 years her senior. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. Joel Pellet, a nursing student at the time, had big dreams, and Maria was also a nurse. After their wedding, they moved to Laredo, Texas, where Joel Pellet secured a high-paying job as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital. Maria Munoz, 31, was a devoted stay-at-home mom in Laredo, Texas, dedicating her time to caring for her 2 young sons and her husband, Joel Pellet, 40. She had left her job to focus on raising her children, and her days were filled with activities like taking them to the park and reading to them before bed. Although she was happy at home with her children, she had always dreamed of returning to school to become a nurse again. On the surface, Joel Pellet's family looked perfect. Joel Pellet often shared family photos with friends and colleagues, proudly talking about his wonderful wife and children. However, beneath the surface, a different reality was taking place. In 2018, after the birth of their second son, people close to Joel Pellet noticed a significant change in his behavior. He lost weight, gained muscle, and became more outgoing, especially with women. His behavior was flirtatious and not what was expected of a married man. He also started removing photos of his wife and children from social media, replacing them with pictures of himself alone. This change gave the impression that he was single. Around the same time, colleagues observed Joel Pellet growing closer to a surgical nurse named Janet Arando. It became clear that they were having an affair behind Maria's back. In early 2020, Maria discovered evidence of their relationship when she found airline tickets Joel Pellet had purchased for himself and Janet to travel to Europe. This revelation devastated Maria, leaving her feeling heartbroken, depressed, and betrayed. She had trusted her husband and thought their marriage was strong, but the discovery shattered her trust. Maria's world was turned upside down when she discovered that her 10-year marriage was a sham. Overwhelmed with emotions, she felt lost and alone, struggling to come to terms with the devastating truth. Seeking guidance, she began therapy sessions to cope with her mental health struggles, and her therapist prescribed medication to support her through this difficult time. As a way to process her emotions, Maria started keeping a journal to express her thoughts and feelings. As the situation between Maria and Joel Pellet continued to deteriorate, tensions escalated. On September 19, 2020, Maria visited Janet's house, where she found Joel Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Confronting him, Maria gave him an ultimatum: choose between her and Janet. Joel Pellet's response was clear: he chose Janet. The argument became heated, prompting Janet to call the police. However, by the time they arrived, Maria and Joel Pellet had already left the scene. Maria was driving with Joel Pellet when the police called her. She could hear him yelling in the background. When they arrived home, he became extremely angry and punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, demonstrating a disturbing level of aggression. The next morning, Maria sent Joel Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to help resolve their issues. Joel Pellet responded, suggesting they handle the situation on their own to avoid the costs associated with hiring lawyers. However, just a few hours later, Joel Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He sent Maria an email expressing his deep sadness and emotional pain. In the email, Joel Pellet conveyed his desire to have an honest and calm conversation with Maria. Maria replied to the email, and they agreed to meet the following evening at around 5 p.m. On Monday, September 21st, before going to meet him, Maria was so nervous and then messaged her friend Jasmine Martinez that today they were going to meet. The next day, a terrifying turn of events unfolded. At around 1:40 a.m. on September 22, 2020, a distressed call was made to 911. Joel Pellet claimed that his wife may have ingested some prescription medication and was not breathing. DEA Officer Cruz was first on the scene and his body camera captured everything that happened next. He found Joel Pellet at the top of the stairs near the master bedroom, Joel Pellet dressed in hospital gown and performing CPR on Maria, while their son slept in a nearby room. When the paramedics arrived, they took charge of performing CPR on Maria. Meanwhile, another police officer approaches Joel Pellet to ask about the pills Maria took. Joel Pellet quickly retrieved a pill bottle from the nearby bathroom, handing it over to the officers. An examination of the bottle revealed that it contained clonazepam, a prescription medication used to treat anxiety, panic attacks, and sometimes epilepsy, prescribed in Joel Pellet's name, not Maria's. The officer noticed two suspicious details. First, the pill bottle had been returned to the medicine cabinet, which is unusual in overdose cases where the bottle typically remains near the victim. Secondly, body camera footage showed Joel Pellet picking up the pill container from the floor and putting it in his pocket before claiming to have found it in the bathroom. DEA Officer Cruz wondered why he would need to retrieve the pills, which made him suspect that Joel Pellet might be hiding something. Another suspicious discovery was a needle catheter on the stairs of their home. This seemed odd to him. Joel Pellet and Maria had two young children, so finding a needle on the stairs raised questions about why it was there. Investigations revealed more than just a needle at the scene. A medical bag was found containing syringes and equipment, all neatly packed. While this might seem ordinary for an anesthesia nurse like Maria, the presence of these medical tools outside a hospital setting sparked questions for investigators. Joel Pellet told officers that Maria had been struggling with severe depression, which had gotten worse recently. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Maria could not be saved. Tragically, she was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. After Maria was declared dead, the officers took Joel Pellet downstairs to the kitchen for further questioning. Joel Pellet explained that he and Maria had met earlier that day to talk, during which they became intimate. Afterward, he took a shower, and when he came out, he found Maria sleeping. When he returned upstairs, he found Maria unresponsive and not breathing. As Joel Pellet spoke with the officer, his behavior seemed unusual. He was sweating heavily and struggled to answer basic questions about what happened. The officer noted that Joel Pellet's level of sweating was noticeably higher than anyone else present, including the first responder who had been trying to save Maria's life for the past 2 hours. This raised the officer's suspicion, leading them to take Joel Pellet to the police station with Sergeant Lisa Mata for more questioning. Joel Pellet was left alone in the interrogation room at the police station for a period of time before an officer arrived. Unbeknownst to him, his every move was being recorded on video. When officers reviewed the footage, they were shocked to see Joel Pellet's sudden and extreme behavior. He began screaming, crying, and hitting the walls, and even threw furniture around the room. His outburst was so loud that it frightened people in the hallway and nearby rooms. At 4 a.m., Sergeant Louis Matt entered the room to speak with Joel Pellet. During their conversation, Joel Pellet opened up about the events leading up to Maria's death. He also made a shocking confession: he had been involved with another woman, Janet, and had been living with her for 5 months prior to Maria's death. Joel Pellet revealed that he had been in a relationship with Janet for 2 years, and Maria had been aware of the affair. According to Joel Pellet, on the night of Maria's death, he visited the home to discuss their marriage with Maria. After their conversation, they became intimate. Joel Pellet claimed that he thought Maria was asleep in her room, but when he checked on her 10 minutes later, he found her unresponsive. Joel Pellet also confessed to giving Maria the medication clonazepam, which had been prescribed to him to help with anxiety and depression. However, he was unable to provide details about the dosage or how many pills were left in the bottle before Maria took them. Despite further questioning, Joel Pellet was unable to provide any additional information to clarify the situation. After the interrogation, he was released. The next step in the investigation was to perform Maria's autopsy, which took place just 8 hours after her death. This quick turnaround meant that any substance that had caused her death should still be present in her stomach contents. However, when the autopsy results came in, they revealed a surprising twist: no pills were found in her stomach. Instead, the medical examiner's report revealed a small, red pinprick mark on the inside of her elbow. This mark was concerning because it suggested that Maria may have been injected with something. The discovery of this mark led investigators to explore its significance and potential connection to her death. As they dug deeper, they discovered a journal at Maria's house. Maria had started keeping a journal to cope with her anxiety and depression. The journal proved to be a crucial piece of evidence, helping investigators identify the culprit behind her death. Maria's journal revealed her heartbreaking experiences and thoughts. Despite knowing her husband Joel Pellet wanted to be with someone else, Maria wanted to preserve their family and expressed her love for him. In her journal entries, she poured out her emotions, detailing the pain of Joel Pellet leaving their home in Laredo and leaving her to care for their 2 young sons alone. Her diary and cell phone recordings also helped investigators uncover Joel Pellet's abusive behavior. Maria's journal entries exposed her emotional journey, from grief and heartbreak to healing and newfound hope for the future. She wrote about feeling trapped in a constant internal battle. She begged for her emotional turmoil to end, describing how her past haunted her, her present was confusing, and her future was uncertain. In a poignant cry for help, Maria turned to a higher power, pleading for an end to her suffering. She asked for laughter, peace, and happiness to return to her life, and for her heart and mind to be free from pain and torture. Maria Munoz's journal entries from the day before her death revealed her desire to move forward with her life. There was no indication of suicidal thoughts or plans to end her life. As a result, investigators initially ruled out the possibility of suicide. To gain a deeper understanding of the circumstances surrounding her death, they sought additional information. Dr. John Hunsinger, anesthesiologist, reviewed the autopsy findings and contacted the lead detective, DEA Cruz, to express his concerns. Dr. John Hunsinger recommended a comprehensive toxicology screening, which the investigators subsequently conducted. In January 2021, Sergeant Louis Matt and DEA Cruz received toxicology test results that contradicted Joel Pellet's claim that Maria had been given clonazepam. The report actually showed that Maria's body did not have that drug. However, it revealed something more astonishing: the presence of 7 other powerful drugs. These medications, typically used in surgical procedures, included morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, and ketamine, as well as lidocaine and Naren. Specifically, Propofol and ketamine are commonly used as sedatives and painkillers during surgeries. Administered through and for. The unusual presence of these drugs was significant, as they are tightly controlled and rarely accessed outside of anesthesiology departments, making it difficult for even many medical professionals to obtain them. The discovery of propofol in Maria's system was the most startling revelation for the investigators. Investigators believe that Joel Pellet, as a nurse anesthetist, had access to propofol due to his profession. Dr. Hunsinger, who worked with Joel Pellet and had experience with propofol, was shocked by the amount found in Maria's system, saying it was the highest amount he had ever seen. This led doctors to believe that propofol was the direct cause of Maria's death. They reasoned that, given his profession, Joel Pellet would have known the proper dosage to either anesthetize someone or cause an overdose. Additionally, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested that she may have been injected with some substance. Considering the autopsy report, Joel Pellet's suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal entries, the investigators believed they had enough evidence to arrest Joel Pellet for the murder of his wife. An arrest warrant was promptly issued, and authorities took Joel Pellet into custody without incident, as if he had anticipated and accepted his fate. Joel Pellet was then taken to the police station, marking a new phase in the investigation. The trial started on March 21, 2023, as the legal proceedings unfolded. Both the prosecution and defense presented their cases. A prosecution team composed entirely of women known as Maria's team utilized Maria Munoz's journal entries to construct a compelling case against Joel Pellet. By sharing Maria's diary entries, prosecutors wanted to show the jury that Maria was a wonderful, caring, and intelligent mother whose vibrant spirit shone through the pages of her diary. The prosecutors alleged that Joel Pellet first drugged Maria by lacing her drink with a substance to make her sleepy. Once she was unconscious, they believed he injected her with propofol. Additionally, they suspected that Joel Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911, waiting long enough to ensure that first responders would be unable to revive her when they arrived. The prosecution team stated that Maria's journals helped them understand the challenges she faced, which fueled their determination to seek justice in her case. Roberto Bali, Joel Pellet's lawyer, informed the jury that his client had been trying to work on his marriage with Maria Munoz before her death. Roberto Bali noted that the medical examiner's report still did not clearly state the cause of Maria's death, and there was not enough evidence to prove Joel Pellet was responsible for her death. Roberto Bali pointed out that Joel Pellet had given Maria a medication called Naren, used to counteract overdoses, on the night she died. He also acknowledged that both Joel Pellet and Maria had struggled with drug addiction in the past. However, Roberto Bali argued that Maria had willingly taken the drugs without being forced, as there were no signs of trauma or coercion on her body. Despite this, investigators found that Maria did not have a history of drug addiction and that Joel Pellet was the only one who could have provided her with the large quantity of propofol. Maria was murdered, and Joel Pellet was put on trial for the crime. During the trial, it was revealed that Joel Pellet had given Maria a substance to calm her down, and he had brought home drugs, including propofol, from work. The jury quickly reached a verdict, finding Joel Pellet guilty of murder after just 1 hour of deliberation. The trial lasted for 9 days, concluding on March 30, 2023, with the guilty verdict. Joel Pellet was later sentenced to life in prison for the murder, plus an additional 10 years for tampering with evidence and a $10,000 fine. This sentence was handed down on April 27, 2023. The motive behind Joel Pellet's killing of his wife Maria Munoz is not entirely clear, but the prosecution believes it was driven by his desire to end his marriage and start a new relationship with his girlfriend Janet Ariel. As a result, Joel Pellet was held accountable for his actions. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Karen Oviedo. Rolando Angel Aquino was born in 1987 in Bolivia. As the eldest of 7 siblings, he learned the importance of family bonds and hard work from an early age. He dreamed of having a happy family filled with the joy and laughter of children. In his youth, he met Carolina Chavez and she bore him a son. Even though they divorced, they still maintained a good relationship. Then Soledad Guardio entered his life and they had another son named Elias. Although the relationship with Soledad did not last long, Rolando remained a devoted and caring father to his children. He still kept in touch and maintained warm relationships with Carolina and Soledad. From an early age, Rolando was very active and passionate about sports, including football, and he played for a local team. Friends and family described him as kind and very hardworking. He got along well with his neighbors and was known for being exceptionally sociable. During a local soccer match, Rolando was attracted to Karen. Rolando and Karen soon developed a romance. A chance meeting led to true happiness. In 2016, Rolando and Karen lived together and opened a business at home. Karen was born on March 30, 1990, and grew up in Manado. Famous for being extroverted and open-minded, Karen always wanted to have a happy family. Before meeting Rolando, she married Ariel, and then she and Ariel had 2 beautiful daughters. However, over time, their marriage began to deteriorate. Financial difficulties were the main cause of their arguments, and they soon divorced. Rolando and Karen's lives passed peacefully, but a tragedy occurred. In the summer of 2019, Rolando's son, 9-year-old Elias, came to Rolando's house to visit him in the afternoon. That evening was filled with laughter from Elias, Rolando, and even Karen. However, the next morning, July 12, 2019, Rolando noticed that Elias was not feeling well. Rolando quickly contacted the family of his ex-wife, Soledad, and quickly took his son to the children's hospital. When Elias was transported to the hospital, pediatricians realized that Elias's condition was critical, requiring immediate transfer to the intensive care unit. Despite the efforts of medical staff, Elias died shortly after arriving at the hospital. What was puzzling was that Elias arrived at his father's house in completely normal health. Medical reports revealed that Elias died of third-degree poisoning, leading to multiple organ failure and cerebral thrombosis. This left Rolando and his ex-wife, Soledad, completely devastated. Doctors recommended additional forensic examinations. However, Soledad and Elias's grandmother refused the procedure. Karen then offered to cremate the boy's body, but Soledad instead chose to bury him in a private cemetery. Elias's death left Rolando completely anguished. He was greatly saddened by the sudden passing of his youngest son. Karen, caring and loving, was always by Rolando's side. She arranged everything, supported her boyfriend, and helped him overcome his pain and grief. Over time, with Karen's warmth and care, Rolando's pain began to ease. 16 months later, Rolando proposed to Karen. They got married, and Rolando believed that she would always be with him. However, their happiness was short-lived. Karen's life took a different turn on February 6, 2022, when she returned home from a gym session to find her husband Rolando extremely unwell. The next day, a medical ambulance was seen outside their home. 35-year-old Rolando had collapsed in the living room after vomiting violently. Emergency medical services quickly arrived, and Rolando was taken to Santa Maria Clinic. The medical team's efforts to save Rolando were ultimately unsuccessful. Rolando died on February 9 from severe poisoning. When medical staff began questioning Karen, they learned that Rolando had been taking medication for skin discoloration. However, this information only increased their suspicions. Closer examination of Rolando's body revealed an overdose of calcium oxalate crystals, which were often a sign of ethylene glycol poisoning, commonly used in automotive antifreeze. This mysterious and unexpected death led to an investigation into Rolando's death, and the authorities were determined to get to the bottom of it. The prosecutor's office questioned Rolando and Karen's neighbors, who revealed that Karen had repeatedly given her husband an unknown drug. Although Karen initially claimed it was a cure for Rolando's skin blemishes, neighbors remained suspicious, which led investigators to look into Karen. During the investigation, Karen was thoroughly questioned about the events surrounding her husband's death. Many conflicts arose during her interrogation. When asked about the substance she gave her husband before he died, Karen confirmed that it was a medicine to treat dark spots on her skin that she used through an intravenous infusion. However, she could not provide the potion because the housekeeper had thrown it away. Further investigation led to an interview with the housekeeper, Claudia Cortez, who contradicted Karen's statement about the disposal of the jar. Claudia also said she overheard a conversation between the couple in which Rolando expressed dissatisfaction with the medication he was taking. As a result, Karen was detained by the police and her cell phone was confiscated for further investigation. Rolando's sudden death shocked his family, friends, and teammates. Rolando's ex-wife, Karen's ex-husband, was especially stunned by rumors that Rolando's death might have been an act of intentional poisoning. Further investigation revealed disturbing evidence. A search of Karen's phone revealed she had researched the most dangerous toxins online and had found a way to delete her search history. Additionally, records showed she had ordered ethylene glycol, a toxic substance used in the manufacture of antifreeze, from an online store on 2 separate occasions. This substance is odorless, has a sweet taste, and is extremely dangerous to humans. Based on preliminary forensic results and collected evidence, the prosecutor's office charged Karen with intentionally poisoning Rolando. It is believed that she mixed the toxic substance with the orange juice that Rolando drank, causing his health to seriously decline and ultimately leading to his death. By mid-February, evidence against Karen had been collected, and Karen had been charged with capital murder. At the same time, investigators had begun looking into suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of 9-year-old Elias. A thorough investigation into Elias' medical history had been initiated by the prosecutor's office. According to the boy's mother, Elias had been in good health until he suddenly fell into a coma at his father's house and never recovered. Elias's death certificate had stated that his body had suffered from cerebral thrombosis. However, investigators had found this explanation suspicious, especially since Elias had been young and he had been in good health. As part of the investigation, the prosecutor's office had requested information about any purchases of ethylene glycol. Karen had been found to have purchased the poison on July 2, 2019, just before Elias had arrived at Aquino's residence. Relatives of Elias had also provided valuable information, revealing that Karen had urged the boy's body to be cremated, but his biological mother had instead chosen a traditional burial. These findings had been enough for prosecutor Claudia Rios to file more serious murder charges against Karen, accusing her of poisoning Elias. A judge had then ordered Karen detained pending trial on March 14. After she had tried to appeal the decision, the judge had overruled her, concluding that Karen would have to remain in detention until the trial began. Karen's highly publicized trial had begun on November 28, 2022, at Mendoza Criminal Court, attracting widespread public and media attention. 2 separate indictments had been pending against Karen, one for the murder of Elias, headed by prosecutor Fernando Gudo, and another for the murder of Rolando, headed by Claudia Rios. During the trial, Javier Aquino, Rolando's 15-year-old son, had appeared as the plaintiff, along with his lawyer. Prosecutor Fernando had presented the case, accusing Karen of poisoning Elias and Rolando by mixing ethylene glycol with orange juice, leading to severe poisoning and death. Karen's defense team had disputed the charges, claiming Rolando had a history of violence and abuse of their client. They had asserted that there had been no reliable evidence to support the allegations and that Karen had had no motive for murder. The defense had questioned why Karen would have killed Elias, who had posed no threat to her. They had also pointed out that Karen had been the sole owner of the house, car, and business and that she had not made any suspicious purchases using her phone. Furthermore, the defense had argued that if Karen had used ethylene glycol to poison Elias, as the prosecutor had claimed, then her search for information about the poison on the internet would have made no sense. The defense had emphasized that although the deaths of Rolando and Elias had been heinous crimes, it had been necessary to clearly prove Karen's guilt before prosecuting her. Karen's defense team had tried to claim the allegations against her had been false. Karen had said that Rolando had bought the antifreeze by hacking into her account instead of buying it herself. Additionally, Karen had claimed to have had an alibi for the day her husband had been poisoned on February 6, saying she had not been home when he had first shown symptoms. As the trial had continued, the prosecution had asked Karen a number of questions. An important point addressed by Prosecutor Fernando had been whether Karen had offered to cremate her deceased son, Rolando. Karen had firmly replied that she had had no say in the matter and had never suggested cremation. The prosecution presented relatives of Rolando as witnesses to provide more insight into the events surrounding the death. Elias's mother, Soledad, testified that after her son's death, Rolando told her that Karen had suggested cremating Elias's body so both families could keep his ashes. However, Soledad refused this idea. She also shared her memories of meeting Rolando at the cemetery, where he mentioned Karen's jealousy. According to Soledad, Karen's jealousy was so intense that she and Rolando slept in separate beds. Another witness, Carolina, the mother of Rolando's first child, confirmed that Rolando and Karen slept separately, as her ex-husband had told her. Although Carolina had not interacted with Karen before the incident, Karen called her on the morning of February 8 to inform her that Rolando was in the hospital due to illness. Karen claimed that Rolando had probably taken some medication and was feeling unwell. She also asked Carolina to help her unlock Rolando's cell phone, suspecting that he was having an affair. Carolina was shocked to hear about Rolando's condition, as they had met just a few days prior and he seemed fine. After speaking with Karen, Carolina learned that Rolando had taken medication for skin blemishes, which caused an allergic reaction. The trial continued with doctors and experts presenting crucial forensic evidence and the results of a psychological examination to the jury. This new information shed light on previously overlooked details. Dr. Ivana Marinelli, a pediatrician who treated Elias in July 2019, explained how the boy was rushed to the hospital with severe breathing difficulties and required immediate intubation. A CT scan revealed a deep cerebral thrombosis, and Elias received intensive care. Dr. Ivana confirmed that Elias's symptoms were consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning, including impaired consciousness, restlessness, and a coma accompanied by a blood clotting disorder. The jury also reviewed the results of Karen's psychological examination, which was conducted at the prosecution's request. The experts found that Karen had lied and concealed the truth. The examination revealed that Karen showed no emotional response to her husband's death, raising doubts about her sincerity. The prosecutor questioned whether Karen had truly been a victim of domestic violence as she had claimed in her statement. This information provided insight into Karen's psychological profile. After weeks of waiting and many court hearings, the trial was finally over. The jury delivered a unanimous verdict after a lengthy period of silence and anticipation. Karen was found guilty of murdering Elias with exceptional cruelty and of causing Rolando's death through a particularly heinous process. As a result, she was sentenced to life in prison. Karen had attempted to evade punishment for the brutal murders that shocked the community and left many unanswered questions. Her plan to cremate the victims' bodies was likely a last-ditch effort to avoid accountability. However, the court and jury remained resolute, ultimately rendering a fair and just verdict. Karen's decision to harm her loved ones remains a puzzle. Despite having everything for a happy life, her motivations may be rooted in emotions like jealousy. This tragic case reminds us that even close relationships can conceal dark secrets, and genuine love and loyalty should always be the top priority. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Wilma Anderson. Wilma Anderson is the daughter of Linda and Marcus Anderson. Her parents' divorce later left difficulties in the family, making Wilma's living situation unstable. Although she could not live with both parents, her mother was always interested in her life. Wilma lived with her older sister Emily. Wilma is an active and ambitious girl. She likes to share her life on social networks, often posting photos on Facebook. Wilma loves being in front of the camera, showing her creativity and cheerful personality. Wilma met Tishko Ahmed Shabazz in Sweden when she was 15 years old. At that time, Tishko was 20 years old. Because the age of sexual consent in Sweden is 15, their relationship did not cause any legal problems. Although initially apprehensive about the 5-year age gap, Wilma's mother trusted her daughter's decision and eventually accepted Tishko. Tishko was originally from Iraq but moved to Sweden with his family when he was 8 years old. Tishko lived with his father and stepmother. During his school years, Tishko faced bullying, but as he grew older, he developed a strong determination to overcome any challenges he faced. In 2014, Tishko became a Swedish citizen, and after completing his studies in 2018, Tishko found a job in the care industry. Wilma and Tishko moved in together in Uddevalla, Sweden. Over time, Tishko became increasingly controlling, and Wilma's mother noticed a change in her daughter's behavior during the 2 years Wilma lived with Tishko. Wilma often confided in her sister Emily about her difficult relationship with Tishko. On November 14, 2019, Wilma told Emily over the phone that she was ending her relationship with Tishko. She was exhausted by Tishko's control over every aspect of her life, including what she wore, where she went, who she talked to, and how she applied her makeup. Feeling suffocated and desperate to end the relationship, she said she had to pack up and leave before Tishko got home from work. Emily tried to contact Wilma, but her calls went unanswered. The next day, November 15th, Wilma missed her dentist appointment. 2 days later, November 17th, Wilma's parents came to the apartment she shared with Tishko. After several knocks, Tishko opened the door, apparently intoxicated. Wilma's mother, Linda, asked Tishko about Wilma's whereabouts. He admitted that their relationship was over and that Wilma had left after taking her things. Tishko claimed that he did not know where Wilma was. Wilma's parents entered the apartment, hoping to find out more. Tishko recounted the argument that led to the breakup, with him and Wilma having a heated argument when he returned home from work around 5:30 p.m. Initially, her parents were not too concerned, as Tishko and Wilma's relationship was unstable. Emily, extremely concerned about Wilma's disappearance, created a Facebook post seeking information about Wilma. Normally, Wilma always contacted her family, so the lack of contact was very unusual. In the post, Emily described Wilma's appearance as 165 centimeters tall with black hair. After the posts were posted on social media, the police got involved. They interviewed Emily and other family members and began searching for anyone who may have come into contact with Wilma. However, neither Linda nor Emily had heard from her since her disappearance. With an extensive search effort underway, a combined task force of police, friends, and family set out to track Wilma using dogs and drone technology. When police approached Tishko for questioning, he claimed to have no knowledge of Wilma's disappearance or whereabouts, confirming that he had had no recent contact with her. By November 17th, 3 days into the search for Wilma, there were still no leads. Wilma was normally active on social media, but she had been strangely quiet during the time she was missing. As a result, some 5,000 people joined the search effort, and police returned to Tishko to gather more information. However, Tishko insisted that he knew nothing about Wilma's disappearance. Tishko claimed that Wilma had moved on to another man after they broke up, but there was no evidence to support this claim. Wilma's friends and family were left deeply concerned about her disappearance. Meanwhile, Wilma's family shared disturbing details with police about how Wilma's life had changed for the worse since living with Tishko. According to Wilma's family, Tishko controlled Wilma's life. Her sister, Emily, revealed that Wilma confessed that she was abused while living with Tishko. But despite this abuse, Wilma still had strong feelings for Tishko. Tishko took extreme measures to monitor Wilma's activities, including installing a GPS device on her phone. This allowed him to constantly track her location. A series of text messages between the two revealed Tishko's controlling behavior. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's alibi. He claimed that after arriving home from work at 5 p.m., he did not leave his apartment. To verify Tishko's story, police tracked the GPS on Tishko's phone. Police found CCTV footage showing Tishko at a supermarket around 2:30 p.m. on the day Wilma went missing. He then returned home from work at 5 p.m. Neighbors reported a loud argument between Tishko and Wilma, and arguments were common between them. A loud argument between the Wilma and Tishko occurred around 6 p.m. This prompted a concerned neighbor to check on them. As the neighbor approached the apartment door, they noticed an eerie silence. The sudden quiet was unsettling, but the neighbor, unsure of what to do next, returned to their own apartment. The police thoroughly investigated Tishko's activities, including his workplace and company vehicle. They requested forensic testing on the vehicle and reviewed the GPS data, which revealed his movements from Thursday the 14th to Monday the 18th. According to the GPS log, Tishko had visited clients and returned to his residence during his regular work hours on those days. On the evening of the argument, around 6:30 p.m., Tishko left his apartment. Witnesses saw him walking alone along the freeway, wearing all black clothing. A motorcyclist described Tishko as appearing lost in thought. Police stopped Tishko and escorted him home. When questioned, Tishko said he initially intended to catch a train but decided to walk home instead. However, the police did not file an official report on the incident. Later, on November 19, 2019, Tishko was arrested. He had obvious scratches on his wrists. A search of Tishko's apartment revealed clues such as Wilma's belongings, including a handbag, jacket, shoes, and eyeglasses. Wilma's mother, Linda, insisted that her daughter would always carry her bag, adding to the mystery. Forensic experts tested the scene with Blue Star, a sophisticated version of luminol, and found a trail of blood. Every room had blood on the walls and floors, suggesting a violent struggle had taken place throughout the apartment. The bed had a gruesome stain, a torso-shaped mark that was visible under the glow of Blue Star. The discovery of muscle tissue on a knife and on the living room wall added to the horrific scene. The large amount of blood found made it seem unlikely that anyone could have survived. The search continued outside the apartment, where trash bags were found containing Tishko's bedding with incriminating blood stains. Confronted at the police station, Tishko was shown the evidence against him. However, he strongly denied any involvement, claiming he would have known if someone had been seriously hurt in his home. At the same time, more and more people were joining the search for Wilma every day. The apartment where Wilma was last seen has now been turned into a crime scene, but all attempts to contact Wilma have been unsuccessful. 2 weeks after Wilma went missing, on November 28, police brought in sniffer dogs to assist in the search. These trained dogs are experts at detecting the scent of dead bodies. When they entered the bedroom, one of the dogs quickly indicated that it had found something, a sign that there was likely a dead person or human remains in the area. A strong, unpleasant stench filled the apartment, making the already gloomy atmosphere even more oppressive. The police had searched the place before, but this time they carefully searched the bedroom, paying special attention to the area the dogs had marked. They focused on a wardrobe, which at first glance looked like another piece of furniture. However, inside this ordinary-looking wardrobe was a small travel suitcase. When they opened the suitcase, the police found a large object wrapped in aluminum kitchen foil. When they carefully removed the foil, they witnessed a horrifying sight with blood stains on the foil. Wilma's head had been severed, wrapped, and secured with tape. The travel case, which held the gruesome evidence of Wilma's fate, was sent to the forensic labs in Gothenburg for further analysis. A detailed examination uncovered Tishko's fingerprints. The investigation revealed the shocking conclusion of the case. Although the exact cause of Wilma's death could not be confirmed, investigators found severe injuries to her head and eyes consistent with blunt force trauma. The violent nature of the decapitation made it difficult to assess the full extent of Wilma's head injuries. Wilma's family was devastated by the news of Wilma's tragic fate. Wilma's mother Linda joined the efforts to find the rest of Wilma's body. The family was forced to confront the horrific details of the crime, which were slowly emerging from the evidence found in Tishko's apartment. A harrowing picture began to emerge. Wilma's final moments may have taken place in the living room, where she was brutally attacked, suffering a fatal blow to the head. Swedish police recorded Tishko's denial of involvement in Wilma's murder, in which he maintained his innocence. His statement revealed a distorted perception of love, as he said, "You forget that this is a girl he loved and that he lived his whole life for. If he killed her, he wouldn't be able to keep her head." Despite this, law enforcement gathered enough evidence to charge Tishko, and his trial was scheduled for May 2020. Throughout the trial, Wilma's body remained missing. Tishko showed no signs of remorse or emotion. In court, his defense team tried to argue that he was not guilty by reason of insanity, pointing to his irrational beliefs and claims about Wilma as evidence. However, this defense was unsuccessful. On July 27, 2020, the court delivered its verdict. Tishko, 23, was found guilty of murdering 17-year-old Wilma Anderson and was initially sentenced to life in prison. However, the appeals court later reduced his sentence to 18 years. The sentence was reduced in part due to a lack of concrete evidence surrounding the circumstances of Wilma's death, including the fact that her body was never found. Wilma's funeral was finally held in late 2020, bringing closure to the tragic events, but undoubtedly causing immense grief for her family. Hey there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Kenneth Keith. Michael Hawkinsmith, 35, was born in Danville, Kentucky. He was a well-known pastor at a local church where he lived. After working at the church for a long time, he decided to work at a local pawn shop called ABC, while continuing to work as a part-time pastor. After a while, due to the previous owner's health issues, Michael had to take over the entire pawn shop. Being an honest and helpful person, he easily connected with people. In his personal life, Michael was married to Angela, and the two had 2 children together, Andrew and Naomi. Michael and Angela jointly owned the ABC Gold, Games and More pawn shop in Danville, Kentucky. They homeschooled their 9-year-old son Andrew and took care of their newborn daughter Naomi. Andrew often visited his parents' workplace and considered it his playground. However, on the morning of September 20, 2013, the Hawkinsmiths went to the ABC store. The morning went as planned. Dan Smith, a regular at the pawn shop, made a scheduled visit. Smith, known as the Gold Man, was known for buying and selling gold between pawn shops across the state. About 15 minutes after opening, As Michael and Smith were making their transactions, a bearded man entered the store and ordered everyone to get on the ground, followed by horrific events. Andrew, who was at the ABC store at the time, after being instructed by his mother, Angela, to hide, noticed the tense situation and quickly called the police to report the situation. 6 minutes after the alarm call, the police arrived at the scene of the murder. When they entered the building, they found a large trail of blood that led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. They then found his wife, Angela, 38, and another victim, Dan Smith, 60, a broker, on the other side of the counter. All 3 victims had suffered serious injuries from gunshot wounds to the head and torso. Police later found Andrew, 9, and Naomi, 14 months, hiding in a closet. Andrew and Naomi had been through unimaginable horror and were orphaned, having lost both their parents. When examining the crime scene, police found 14 spent shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase belonging to Dan Smith. Remarkably, the victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the cash register were untouched, suggesting that robbery was not the motive. The case was complicated by the lack of surveillance cameras at the pawn shop. Therefore, police had to search for potential witnesses. An employee of Rainbow Cleaners, a nearby dry cleaner, provided vital information when he described a vehicle that had been parked near the building that morning. The vehicle was a silver pickup truck driven by a large man with a bushy beard. While one team of investigators searched the area, another team had to notify the victims' closest relatives of the tragedy. Michael's parents were devastated by the news. However, they also felt blessed to know that their grandchildren, Andrew and Naomi, had survived. The tragic news reached the daughter of the 3rd victim, Dan Smith. Dan Smith was involved in the purchase of precious metals and was well versed in the specifics of his job, which made it easy for him to find common ground with different people. His business involved handling large amounts of cash, sometimes in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. This led police to suspect that Dan Smith may have been the criminal's primary target. Through surveillance, police discovered that before going to the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop, Dan Smith had gone to the Lawson Jewelry Store in Harrodsburg, 10 miles northeast of Danville. Inside the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera mounted on the far wall that was monitoring every customer who entered and exited the store. Their goal was to determine if anyone was following Dan Smith. At 8:16 a.m., Dan Smith entered the store, and there were no other customers in the building at the time. Dan Smith was carrying a briefcase identical to the one later found at the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. After greeting the woman behind the counter with a smile, he walked toward the back of the store. Moments later, Dan Smith reappeared in the footage, exiting the back of the store, chatting briefly with an elderly woman who had just entered, and then leaving immediately. Footage from the exterior camera did not show anything suspicious. The police could do nothing but monitor the man, unaware that he would soon be at the center of a tragic event. Meanwhile, Andrew Hawkinsmith was brought to the police station to testify. Andrew told the story of how he was at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith came in with a bag full of money. While Michael and Dan were talking, a stranger walked in and demanded the bag of money immediately. According to Andrew, Dan Smith immediately gave the stranger his bag of money. Andrew said that his father asked the man to stop, but the man also shot his father with a handgun similar to the one Andrew often played with. After that, his mother instructed him to take his younger sister, Naomi, to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew picked up his sister and hid. At that moment, the criminal pointed the gun at Angela. The 9-year-old boy thought the reason the stranger did this might be because of the money. The boy described the stranger as a very tall man with a fake-looking blonde beard, which matched the description given by a witness from Rainbow Cleaners. In investigating the case, police thoroughly investigated the business run by the Hawkinsmith family. They discovered that the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop had a different owner, Steve Devine. Although he usually attended Friday transactions with Dan Smith, he was absent on the morning of September 20th. This information raised concerns, making determining his whereabouts a top priority. Steve Devine explained that he had an allergic reaction that morning and had to cancel all his appointments. His wife confirmed this story. The alibi and the fact that Steve Devine did not own a silver pickup truck helped eliminate him as a suspect. Steve Devine also explained why there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop. According to him, the security system had been removed by the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith. The new owner had yet to install a replacement. Kenneth Allen Keith, 48, is a pastor like Michael Hawkinsmith. He sold the pawn shop after being diagnosed with brain cancer. However, he is still the owner of another similar establishment, Gold Rush Buyers, in Pulaski County, near Danville's Bowles District. Their friendship began when Michael worked at a church youth camp and lasted 15 years. The Hawkinsmiths respected Pastor Kenneth, and he was like a beloved uncle to Andrew. With no significant leads, investigators decided to search the street surveillance systems near ABC Gold Games and More and other pawn shops. They found a camera on the office building of the real estate company Danville Rentals. Surveillance footage captured a silver pickup truck at 8:45 a.m., but the image was too blurry to determine the license plate or make. However, eyewitness testimony from Rainbow Cleaners helped police identify the vehicle. The witness described the vehicle as an older model with a distinctive square body shape. The vehicle in the video also clearly showed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the vehicle all suggested that police had found the vehicle of the criminal. They continued to search surveillance systems farther and farther away from the pawn shop. Finally, at 8:17 a.m., cameras at the local Ephraim McDowell Hospital captured the same vehicle. Investigators were able to determine that it was a silver Dodge pickup truck. Dan Smith's family was also devastated by the loss of their loved one. Despite their grief, they attended the funeral and held back their anger. In search of more clues, the Danville police asked the public to come forward with any information about the crime or the vehicle involved. On September 24th, the police received the call from Tracy Hurl, a pastor in Warren, Michigan. He claimed to be a friend of Kenneth Keith and said that in their last conversation, they had discussed the Danville murders. At that point, Kenneth seemed to have changed. Pastor Kenneth Allen informed Tracy that on that particular day, he was driving to Danville to pick up medication for his wife. Kenneth also expressed guilt over what had happened, as he had given Michael Hawkinsmith the opportunity to become the owner of his former business. It turned out Kenneth's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not what people thought. Tracy recounted that in a conversation with Kenneth said that Michael was a fraud and that Michael had done everything to take over the business from him. These statements aroused suspicion, leading to Kenneth being named a suspect. To verify Kenneth's alibi, investigators decided to review surveillance footage from the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where Kenneth said he had purchased medication for his wife at 9:24 a.m. According to the surveillance footage, a man entered the pharmacy. It was Kenneth. But just a few minutes earlier, the man was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which were easily identifiable features of an attacker. However, this did not rule out the possibility that Kenneth was involved in the attack. There was a 6-minute gap between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and Kenneth's arrival at the pharmacy. The police decided to check whether it was possible to travel from the crime scene to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy in such a short time. They found that the trip took about 5 minutes, so Kenneth could have committed the murder, quickly gotten in the car, and gone to the pharmacy to establish a solid alibi. In addition, the main clue was that Kenneth had an unregistered 2008 Dodge pickup truck, silver in color. However, all the evidence found was circumstantial and not enough to make an arrest. So the investigators asked Tracy Hurl to participate in a series of fake phone calls aimed at Kenneth. Fortunately, Tracy agreed. During these calls, Kenneth finally revealed his true feelings towards the Hawkinsmith family. Everyone had been waiting for this to happen. Kenneth began discussing details of the case that had not been made public. Kenneth said that he was in Danville, but he was at the pharmacy. Kenneth confirmed that he was standing in the pharmacy while all this was happening. Kenneth then explained that he had left Danville and returned to Somerset. He then drove to the car wash to prepare for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 a.m., Kenneth was seen on camera walking down the hallway to the cash register with a noticeable smile. Exterior camera footage covering the parking lot showed Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25 a.m., matching all previous images captured by various surveillance systems in Danville. At that point, they had enough evidence to arrest Kenneth. However, when he was offered a lie detector test to clarify his role in the case, he reacted in an unusual way. He claimed that he would not be able to pass a lie detector test because, during his military service, he had performed some special missions that involved killing a number of people. Investigators then executed a search warrant at Kenneth Allen Keith's pawn shop and discovered some important evidence. They found a fake beard and a significant amount of cash without any legal explanation as to how he had obtained it. In particular, they also found bundles of money wrapped in a ribbon with the name of the bank that issued them, indicating that Dan Smith was a customer. Further investigation revealed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a deceased broker. This raised suspicions about Keith's involvement in the case. In addition, investigators also found several .22 caliber shell casings in Keith's pawn shop. After ballistic analysis, they discovered that these casings had been fired from the same type of weapon used to shoot Andrew and Naomi's parents. Kenneth Allen Keith was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and robbery. He believed that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Dine were conspiring to remove him from the business. However, there was no evidence that Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Dine were involved in any conspiracy. When Kenneth met Dan Smith at the pawn shop, he tried to create a fake plan to make the police think that the case was a robbery. However, the plan failed when the police investigated and found no evidence of suspicious activities by Michael Hawkinsmith and Steve Dine. On September 20th, Kenneth arrived in Danville in his silver Dodge Caravan. He circled the pawn shop until he saw Dan Smith's car parked nearby. Kenneth then killed Dan Smith, Michael Hawkinsmith, and Angela Hawkinsmith. After taking all the cash, Kenneth calmly left the crime scene and stopped at the Good Neighbor Pharmacy, which was captured on surveillance cameras, creating a false alibi. Kenneth's decision to have his car washed appears to have been another attempt to remove any evidence that might have been left on the car. Prior to sentencing, in 2017, Kenneth Allen Keith pleaded guilty to all charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ariel Castro. Ariel Castro was born in 1960 on July 10th in the city of Yauco in Puerto Rico. Ariel was the 3rd child in a poor family of 4 children, including parents Liliana Rodriguez and Pedro Castro, and sisters O'Neill, Pedro, and older sister Bonita. Ariel's family barely made ends meet and his parents were constantly arguing. Before Ariel went to school, his parents divorced. His mother Liliana took care of all the children. Now Liliana had almost nothing left to feed her children. In desperation, Liliana and her children decided to move to the United States and settled for a while in southeastern Pennsylvania in the city of Reading. However, they soon moved to the neighboring state of Ohio and eventually settled in the city of Cleveland. Soon after, Ariel's father Pedro Castro also moved to Cleveland with his new wife and their children. Pedro Castro lived near Liliana and her children. Liliana later married, and Ariel soon had 4 more siblings. Ariel attended Lincoln West High School in Cleveland, graduating in 1978. In addition, Ariel also studied music and attended church regularly with her mother and siblings in a traditional Catholic family. As a teenager, Ariel met a young girl named Grimilda Figueroa, who lived next door to Castro. The two became friends while attending school, and Ariel and Grimilda later began dating. After saving money, Ariel and Grimilda decided to move to a house on Seymour Avenue in southwest Cleveland. The 2-story, 1,300 square foot house was built in 1890 and has been remodeled several times. Inside, there are 4 bedrooms, a dining room, a bathroom, and a spacious basement. However, since moving into the new house, Ariel regularly beats Grimilda and humiliates her morally and physically. Grimilda is still naive at this time and thinks that the situation will improve after the wedding and the birth of the child. However, as time goes by, the situation only gets worse. Grimilda tries not to let anyone know about the terrible things that are happening in her life. Grimilda hides her injuries under her clothes and makes up excuses for the injuries that cannot be hidden. In 1993, Ariel beat his wife so brutally that Grimilda suffered broken ribs, nose, and both arms from falling down the stairs after being pushed by Ariel. However, Grimilda steadfastly refused to report the incident to the police. The incident was covered up. Ariel repeatedly beat Grimilda in the mid-1990s. On one occasion, Ariel caused Grimilda a serious head injury that resulted in a blood clot and a tumor that could not be surgically removed. Ariel was arrested but released just a day later. By the late 90s, Grimilda was tired of the constant beatings and living in fear. Grimilda finally decided to file for divorce, took away the appliances, and moved out of the house. Grimilda won custody of all 4 of their children, Arlene, Antonio, Angie, and Amelia. However, Grimilda's nightmare did not end there. Ariel began to pursue Grimilda for money and threatened her to return to him. Realizing that Grimilda could not handle it on her own, Grimilda finally decided to report to the police to get a restraining order against Ariel. In late April 2012, Grimilda suffered complications related to an inoperable tumor caused by a head injury. Grimilda's children were old enough to care for themselves and live their own lives, so they did not need a guardian. However, the children still maintained contact with their father Ariel. Back in the early 2000s, Ariel lived alone in a 2-story house on Seymour Avenue. Ariel worked as a school bus driver and had a passion for playing the guitar. Ariel often performed at city festivals in Latin bands. His neighbors often spoke highly of him, praising his hospitality and kind personality. However, there were many strange things in Ariel's actions that went unnoticed. That he was prosecuted several times for traffic violations while driving a school bus. He had speeding and dangerously making U-turns, for which he was fined and even suspended for a while until he was fired in early 2013 for an act that threatened the lives and health of his young passengers. Additionally, Ariel frequently changed bands because Ariel was kicked out for being late, disrupting rehearsals and concerts. Another strange thing is that after his divorce from Grimilda, he never invited anyone to his house, although Ariel often invited neighbors to barbecues in his backyard. It's hard to say how dangerous this smiling, kindly-faced Ariel was. Michelle Knight was Ariel Castro's first victim. In 2002, on August 23, Ariel decided to kidnap Michelle Knight, then 21 years old. Michelle Knight was born in 1981 and came to Cleveland. Michelle was a frequent runaway and had a history with the police. After becoming a single mother, Michelle faced the risk of losing custody of her 2-year-old child. On the day of the incident, Michelle visited a relative's house and then had to go to court, where the issue of regaining custody of her 2-year-old child had just been decided. While walking down the street, Michelle saw Ariel Castro driving up and offering her a ride. Since Michelle knew the nearby school bus driver, she didn't suspect Ariel and decided to get in his car. On the way, Ariel tells Michelle that he is taking care of puppies at home and invites Michelle to visit them and help Ariel find homes for the puppies. Michelle agrees, but as soon as she enters Ariel's house, he changes completely. Ariel becomes violent and begins hitting Michelle repeatedly. Ariel then chains her up and takes her to the basement. Over the next few days, Ariel starved Michelle and denied her water. Michelle endured constant beatings and abuse. She could not even get up and had to beg Ariel to let her go, promising not to tell anyone about it. When Michelle's mother reported her daughter missing to the police, for years the police did not prioritize the case and allocated limited resources to the investigation. Michelle's family searched for the girl themselves by contacting neighbors, friends, and concerned people. They also asked for help from Ariel, who helped post flyers around the city with Michelle's picture. However, no one knew that Michelle was being held in Ariel's basement. Ariel's second character was Amanda Berry. This girl was kidnapped in the spring of 2003. Amanda was a young girl who lived near Ariel and worked at a local restaurant. She was born on April 22, 1986 and was about to celebrate her 17th birthday. However, on April 21, 2003, Amanda mysteriously disappeared. After her shift, Amanda called home and told her sister that she would be home soon. As Amanda left the restaurant and headed to the bus stop, Ariel drove up to her and offered to give Amanda a ride home. Amanda accepted. Amanda knew Ariel's son because they had been in the same class for many years. So Amanda trusted Ariel and agreed to go with him. However, Ariel lied to her along the way, saying that Ariel needed help. When Amanda entered Ariel's house, Amanda was trapped. Ariel raped her in public, then took Amanda to the basement. There, she met Michelle, who had been kidnapped and held captive for months. Amanda was also attacked, abused, and starved for days until Amanda's body was too weak to resist. A massive search was launched after Amanda went missing. Her disappearance was widely reported in the media and Amanda's parents appeared on popular television shows such as Oprah Winfrey and Montel Williams. They shared their story and urged anyone with information about Amanda's whereabouts to contact them immediately. On one show, famous psychic Sylvia Brown was invited on. After viewing a photo of Amanda, she said that the girl had died and her body was in the water. The words troubled Amanda's parents, but the mother, Louise Miller, continued to search for her daughter until she died in March 2006 of a heart attack. In 2012, a criminal named Robert Wolford suddenly confessed to Amanda's murder and offered to show them where her body was buried. Robert led police to a vacant lot in West Cleveland, claiming that he had buried Amanda there. However, a lengthy search failed to uncover any trace. Robert was later found to have lied for fame and television, leading to his being sentenced to an additional 5 years in prison for perjury and obstructing justice. In April 2004. This time, Ariel chose Gina de Jesus, a 14-year-old girl in his daughter's class. Ariel met Gina and another girlfriend after school. After chatting for a while, the two girls decided to go home separately. When they reached the corner of West 105th Street, Ariel met Gina and offered to take Gina home. Since Gina had known Ariel since childhood, having long been the father of her best friend, Gina got into Ariel's car without suspecting anything. Although it was daytime, there were no witnesses to the kidnapping because the streets were deserted at that time. In addition, Gina took the initiative to get into Ariel's car, so there was no easily detectable conflict. The story of Gina's disappearance was aired on Fox TV's America's Most Wanted and was re-aired twice in 2005 and 2006. Ariel also posed as a volunteer looking for missing girls. When she brought Gina home, Ariel treated Gina similarly to Michelle and Amanda. Abused, sexually assaulted, and locked in the basement. It is believed that the kidnapping was carried out by a middle-aged Hispanic man. Was seen by a passerby. There was even a sketch that looked very similar to Ariel. During the 10 years of their captivity, Ariel constantly abused her victims. They were often starved, attempting to break their spirits and destroy their self-esteem. Severe punishments were also carried out if the three girls did not comply. Michelle, the oldest captive, suffered the most. Ariel would not spare her and would often beat Michelle to intimidate the other girls, forcing them to obey without asking any questions. After years of captivity in the dark and damp basement, Ariel moved them to a room on the second floor, which overlooked the courtyard. During her captivity, Michelle became pregnant at least 5 times. However, each time she showed signs of pregnancy, Ariel brutally attempted to terminate the pregnancy, starving Michelle and kicking her in the stomach until Michelle miscarried. After one brutal torture, Michelle almost died from severe blood loss. Despite this, Ariel remained completely indifferent and refused to let her call a rescue vehicle. The girls were not allowed to bathe more than once a week. To use the toilet, they had only a bucket of water, which Ariel rarely emptied. Ariel only fed the girls once a day but constantly beat and abused them. One day, Ariel gives the girls a puppy, but a week later, Ariel brutally kills the dog in front of them as punishment for Michelle's disobedience. Gina, in 2006, Amanda realizes she is pregnant and is horrified by the image of Ariel beating her to induce a miscarriage. Ariel this time let Amanda get pregnant and give birth. In preparation for the birth, he bought a special inflatable float. In December 2006, Amanda gave birth to a daughter named Jocelyn. Although the baby was born weak, she was lucky to survive. As Jocelyn grew older, the girls began to care for her and create a close environment for her. This helped them temporarily forget the difficult situation they were in. Ariel also changed significantly after having his daughters. Ariel began giving the 3 girls he kidnapped small gifts and sometimes letting them out into the yard with Jocelyn, but always under close supervision. Jocelyn was developing well, speaking clearly, and being taught to read, write, and count by her mother. Outwardly, she appeared healthy, well cared for and well fed. Despite being imprisoned for years under Ariel's relentless control, the victims attempted to escape many times, but each time they were brutally punished, but the girls never gave up hope. However, on May 6, 2013, Ariel left the house and forgot to lock one of the interior doors. This gave Amanda an opportunity. She left the room and went to the window that looked out onto the street. When Amanda saw a neighbor walking past the house, Amanda began banging and screaming at the window. A man heard a strange noise and stopped, thinking someone needed help. Another neighbor also heard the screams and decided to call emergency services. While waiting for the police to arrive, the men broke the lock on the front door and helped Amanda and her young daughter escape. When the police arrived, Amanda told them that her name was Amanda Berry and that she had been kidnapped 10 years ago. Amanda also said that 2 other kidnapped girls were being held in a house, in other apartments. All 3 were rescued and taken to hospital the same day. Amanda, her younger daughter Jocelyn, and Gina were not in critical condition, but Michelle had suffered severe physical and mental damage from the constant abuse. Michelle lost hearing in one ear and almost lost sight in her left eye. Many of Michelle's bones were bent and would not heal, requiring plastic surgery to restore the shape of her disfigured face. After the trauma and forced abortion, Michelle was unable to have children. When police received a report of 3 missing girls and a baby found in Ariel's home, Ariel Castro was arrested in a McDonald's parking lot just an hour later. Ariel's brothers, O'Neill and Pedro, were also arrested on suspicion of involvement, as they had been frequent visitors to Ariel's home. However, they were quickly released due to lack of evidence linking them to the case, as the victims had confirmed. Ariel was charged with forcible kidnapping, assault, battery, forcible confinement, cruelty, and taking the life of an unborn child. Ariel could have received a common-law conviction. However, the prosecution required a death sentence. Ariel agreed to cooperate with the investigation and pleaded guilty. Ariel would recount all the events that took place in his home. In return, he would not be sentenced to death but instead to life in prison. Surprisingly, Ariel recalls in great detail the days of kidnapping the girls and bringing them into his home. Ariel recounted all the torture and abuse he had inflicted on his victims, but blamed the girls for unwittingly agreeing to get into Ariel's car and condemned himself to such a fate. On August 1, 2013, Ariel was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On July 9, 2013, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina De Jesus began a new life after being released from the Insanity's custody. After his conviction, Ariel was transferred to a rehabilitation center in Orient, Ohio, where he was closely monitored. However, on September 3, 2013, Ariel was found dead in his cell. At the time, Ariel was 53 years old. Ariel Castro's family members have apologized to the victims and their families. Michelle Knight wrote a book titled Life After Darkness: Finding Healing and Happiness After the Cleveland Kidnapping in 2018. Gina De Jesus also published a memoir titled Hope, a Memoir of Survival in Cleveland. There are also multiple documentary projects and 2 feature films about the terrifying kidnapping mission. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kristen Smart. Kristen Denise Smart was born on February 20, 1977, in Augsburg, Bavaria, West Germany. She was raised by her parents, Stan and Denise Smart. When she was young, the family moved to Stockton, California. She is the oldest of 3 children. Kristen's mother, Denise, often called her a dreamer. Kristen loved the ocean and had an adventurous spirit. She was truly passionate about experiencing life. Kristen graduated from Lincoln High School in Stockton in 1995. Before college, she worked as a lifeguard and a summer camp counselor at Camp Mokulea in Hawaii. In 1996, Kristen enrolled at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California. She was ambitious but indecisive. Kristen initially enrolled at Cal Poly to study architecture because she loved to draw, but later changed her major to communication studies. Denise said that Kristen wanted to travel the world as a reporter. On Memorial Day weekend in 1996, Kristen called home and left a voicemail, "Good news, good news. I'll call home Sunday." Kristen was in regular contact with her family every Sunday. That day, Kristen had attended an off-campus birthday party that Friday night. Her friend, Margarita Campos, recalled taking her there. Margarita said Kristen seemed a little upset that Margarita couldn't join her that night. Margarita's last words to Kristen were to be careful. Kristen was wearing a gray cropped t-shirt, black shorts, and red Puma sneakers. As the party was winding down, at 2 a.m., classmate Tim Davis found Kristen unconscious on the grass nearby. He and another classmate and acquaintance of Kristen's, Cheryl Anderson, helped her walk back to the school dormitory. Paul Florist then approached Kristen and offered to help her get back to her dorm, saying he was leaving the party. Paul, Kristen, and Cheryl returned to campus, and since Davis lived off campus, he could not accompany them. Once the 3 of them were alone, Cheryl began to notice Paul's strange behavior. She noticed the many unexpected stops along the way and the way he interacted with Kristen. While walking, Paul would frequently hold Kristen around the waist, and Kristen would also wrap her arms around his neck. This made Cheryl even more curious, especially when Paul suggested that Cheryl walk ahead while he and Kristen tried to catch up. Cheryl eventually went her own way, but not before reminding Paul to make sure Kristen returned safely. Paul claimed that he had dropped Kristen off at the intersection of the hallways leading to both of their dorms. It was around 2:30 a.m. on May 25, 1996. Kristen Smart was never seen again. When Sunday passed without a call from Kristen, Kristen's roommates and neighbors thought something was wrong. They contacted the university police department to report Kristen missing, but no report was filed. Concerned, they called Kristen's family and the San Luis Obispo Police Department. 5 days after Kristen went missing, Paul was interviewed by UPD investigators. Paul said that the two had gone their separate ways at the intersection. However, investigators quickly noticed Paul's black eye. When asked about it, Paul explained that he had injured it during a basketball game. But a friend later disputed this story, stating that Paul's black eye had appeared before the basketball game. Paul told the friend that he didn't know how he got the black eye, he just woke up with it. A month later, Paul was interviewed again and confessed that he had lied about the black eye incident. This time, Paul said that he had hit his eye on the steering wheel of a truck. However, when questioned further, Paul admitted that this story didn't make sense either. He said he was in the truck at about 2 a.m. on May 27, 1996, and was installing a car radio because he was selling the truck. A search for Kristen began. Search dogs were used on June 29, 1996. For dogs trained to search for human remains were used individually to search for clues at the dormitory. Santa Lucia Hall. Each dog was sent to room 128, Paul Flores' room. The dogs showed no interest in the room, except for the corner of a mattress. Dog handler Carta Adela Morris said the dogs can detect the slightest physiological changes. During the search, their reactions suggested a high probability that there was a body in room 128. Another handler also recalled her dog's behavior while searching room 128. The dog searched the left side of the room several times, and Tori's behavior and strong reactions suggested that she had picked up the scent of something, but was still searching for its source. Although Paul Flores remained the prime suspect, no formal charges were ever filed. During that time, Paul Flores continued to live his life freely, although he was suspected by the police. From 1996 to 2007, the investigation continued, and searches were conducted at every possible location, including 4 properties owned by the Flores family. However, none of these searches yielded positive results. On the advice of his attorney, Paul Flores decided not to answer any questions by exercising his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. A person who invokes this provision has the right to remain silent and is not required to provide information that could incriminate them. During his 1997 deposition, Paul exercised this right and remained silent. This made it difficult for investigators, especially attorney James R. Murphy, as they were unable to find any new leads. Despite the overwhelming evidence linking Paul to the case, former Sheriff Ed Williams also admitted that he did not see a way to close the case. Paul's silence frustrated the authorities. The Smart family filed a wrongful death lawsuit for Kristen. However, the court decided not to proceed with charges. Kristen's case remains under criminal investigation. Paul and his family have refused to publicly address Kristen's case or the allegations against them. A roommate of Paul's, Derek C., said Paul joked about Kristen's disappearance. However, these allegations remain speculative as Paul has hired a lawyer to defend himself from further questioning. 6 years after her disappearance, Denise Smart said it was a difficult time. A longtime case follower, Chris Lambert, who was 8 at the time, was haunted by Kristen's disappearance. As he grew older, he wondered why the case of Kristen were still no answers. In 2018, Chris quit his job to create a podcast about the case full-time. With no formal training in law or journalism, he was driven only by his passion for finding answers. In 2019, Chris visited Kristen's memorial on her birthday and decided to wait to meet someone willing to talk about Kristen. Chris met Kristen's mother and began talking to her about her daughter. From there, Chris and the Smart family built a strong relationship and worked to bring Kristen's story to the public through the podcast, In Your Own Backyard. The podcast began as a local series but quickly went national and garnered over 11 million downloads. The core of the podcast follows the case of Kristen Smart and her disappearance from campus. Chris has a unique ability to get people to feel comfortable sharing information with him. He has interviewed many people who have been involved in the case to varying degrees. Chris is especially interested in witnesses who are reluctant to speak or have been ignored by investigators. He has uncovered many allegations that have been speculation for years. An interview with an Australian exchange student brought to light a possible fight between Kristen and Paul. According to Chris, the student allegedly saw Kristen fighting with Paul on the night of her disappearance. During the investigation into Kristen Smart's disappearance, several theories emerged. The first theory was that Paul Flores was injured in a fight with Kristen. The second theory was that Paul's father, Ruben Flores, helped cover up the crime. The third theory was that Kristen's body was buried in the Flores backyard. The investigation also revealed allegations of serious misconduct by Paul toward multiple women. Women who had attended school or worked with Paul reported his excessive flirting and excessive drinking. Several women accused Paul of sexual or physical assault, including harassment and controlling behavior. Chris attempted to contact Paul for an interview, but was unsuccessful. An interview could have cleared up some of the loose ends and given Paul a chance to address the allegations against him. However, Chris has not contacted Kristen's family. San Luis Obispo Police Chief and Parkinson praised Chris for his work in helping to advance the investigation into Kristen Smart's disappearance. Chris created a compelling, well-done podcast that drew people to the case. Parkinson noted that going public with the story convinced several people involved to come forward, which had a significant impact on the investigation. Denise Smart also thanked Chris for his hard work, saying that the podcast had created an opportunity for people to come together to seek the truth. She also thanked Sheriff Parkinson for helping to keep the case fresh since he took office in 2011. Although the Flores family has remained silent, the investigation and podcast have shaken their confidence. On January 29, 2020, 2 trucks owned by Paul Flores were presented as evidence. Then, on February 5 of that year, authorities executed search warrants at 4 different locations, including a home in Los Angeles. During the search, Paul Flores was briefly detained. On April 22, 2020, the Los Angeles Times reported that a search warrant was executed at Paul Flores' home in San Pedro, California. The search resulted in the recovery of several items of evidence, including date rape drugs and videos showing Paul Flores sexually assaulting young women. Paul Flores was subsequently arrested on February 11, 2021, in Palos Verdes, Rancho, California, on suspicion of being a felon in possession of a firearm. In March of that year, a search warrant was issued at the home of Paul's father, Ruben Flores, and police used dogs and ground-penetrating radar to search the property, and an older Volkswagen was towed away for evidence after the dogs conducted the search. On April 13, Paul and his father, Ruben, were arrested by the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department in connection with Kristen's case. Paul and Ruben were charged in the case involving Kristen. Paul was charged with murder, and Ruben was charged with accessory after the fact. Due to the statute of limitations, Paul was able to escape the sexual assault charge but still faced a first-degree murder charge for allegedly killing during attempted rape. In September 2021, a judge declared the case sufficient to go to trial in April 2022. However, the trial was postponed and moved to Monterey County. On July 18, 2022, Paul and Ruben's trials began simultaneously but with two separate jury groups. In his opening statement, Deputy Prosecutor Chris Pavril described Kristen as a young person who had been cruelly treated and taken too soon. He said Kristen's family was suffering from the unknown whereabouts of their daughter and blamed Paul Flores for this. The deputy prosecutor also presented evidence found at Ruben's home that showed both Paul and Ruben were responsible for Kristen's death and the disposal of her body. However, Paul's defense attorney, Robert Sanger, questioned the veracity of this evidence. He said it was a tragic situation that Kristen's body was never found and there was no DNA evidence. He stated that people believed she was dead, but there was no concrete evidence of what happened to her after Paul left her at the dorm. Since July, Paul Flores' trial has attracted public attention as multiple allegations of harassment and violence have been made. Several women have come forward to accuse Paul Flores of inappropriate behavior, including two women who call themselves Rondado and Saradu. Both women alleged that they met Paul Flores and then felt unusually lethargic, leading to memory loss. When they woke up, they said Paul Flores had abused them. Their detailed and emotional testimony brought jurors to tears, forcing Judge Jennifer O'Keefe to call a recess. In addition, testimony regarding the search of Ruben Flores' home also moved another juror to tears. Investigators and experts also attended the trial, providing more details about the case. Judge O'Keefe said the trial would be long and difficult, and jurors would likely be emotional at times. One of the key pieces of evidence presented at the trial was Jennifer Hudson's testimony. She said she met Paul Flores when she was 17, and that he told her that he had buried Kristen Smart under the slope in his backyard in Hawasna. This was one of the most important pieces of evidence presented at the trial. Paul's defense attorney questioned Jennifer's testimony and highlighted her recreational use of drugs and alcohol, calling into question her credibility. The attorney suggested that she was being dishonest in her answers to the question. In fact, Jennifer admitted in a social media post that she did not report the incident to police until after a podcast aired. She also canceled an interview with a detective after meeting with the podcast producer in 2019. The attorney went on to ask Jennifer if she thought Kristen Smart was buried in Susan Flores' backyard. She suggested that this was the most plausible explanation. When the attorney pursued the subject of Jennifer's association with biker gang members, the prosecutor objected to the question and the judge sided with them. During cross-examination, Pavril asked Jennifer to explain her previous testimony and that Jennifer felt responsible for the Smart family's suffering. She explained that if she had not been afraid, she would have spoken up sooner. Jennifer then broke down in tears. No reason was given, and the trial was adjourned after Jennifer's testimony. The trial of Kristen Smart is scheduled to continue until October 2022. For the Smart family, the emotional, decades-long search for the truth is finally coming to an end. However, the grief over the loss of their daughter will never end. On October 18, 2022, separate juries hearing the case simultaneously in Monterey County Circuit Court found Paul Flores guilty of first-degree murder and his father, Ruben Flores, not guilty of being an accessory after the fact. Ruben Flores faces a maximum sentence of 3 years in prison. Paul Flores was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison on March 10, 2023. Paul Flores is currently serving his sentence at Pleasant Valley State Prison. On August 23, 2023, Flores was attacked by fellow inmate Jason Boudreau, who was serving a life sentence for killing his girlfriend. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Jasmine Richardson. The Richardson family was widely admired for their friendly and hospitable personalities, which made everyone feel at home. Deborah, Mark, and their children, Tyler and Jasmine, lived in a cozy home. Their home is frequented by friends, and the family atmosphere is built on the principles of love and respect. However, Things took a turn when Jasmine, their 12-year-old daughter, entered puberty. From a calm and obedient girl, she grew into a confident but also impulsive young woman. This new personality led to frequent conflicts with her parents, and her academic performance started to decline. Jasmine's interests changed in a big way. She switched from listening to modern pop music to heavy rock. In addition, her fashion style is no longer the same as before. Gone were the bright colors and cheerful clothing. Instead, she opted for a darker, more somber style that was often provocative. It was clear that Jasmine was trying to attract the attention of boys, and she began to accentuate the curves of her body. Her interaction with friends noticeably decreased as she began spending more time alone in her room, often with the door closed, glued to her computer screen. After the internet became available at home, her interests shifted to exploring Gothic themes, reading dark poetry, learning about criminal psychology, and studying human anatomy. She also became fascinated with criminal psychology and the Wiccan religion, referring to herself as a witch. She connected with like-minded individuals through websites focused on similar interests, forming a community of friends who shared her passions. Her social media page featured the greeting, "Welcome to my tragic world." Jasmine's behavior, initially thought to be a sign of puberty, but late became more concerning as she began to distance herself from her family. She created a fictional online persona, gave herself a different name, age, and began seeking relationships with people much older than her. Her parents tried their best to support her during this difficult period, suggesting that they spend time together by participating in common activities. However, Jasmine found these suggestions uninteresting. Her relationship with her younger brother deteriorated as she started speaking to him less frequently, viewing him as an annoyance. In stark contrast, she spends hours talking to strangers on social media, building other relationships, to make up for her lackluster relationships with family and friends. Deborah and Mark were aware that their daughter's new hobbies were likely a temporary phase of her youth. As a result, they were patient and allowed her to explore her interests. When Jasmine asked to attend a punk rock concert, her parents agreed. If only they had known the consequences that would follow this outing. In early 2006, Jasmine attended a local concert by a youth band that shared her interests. She also knew that Jeremy Steinke, a boy who had caught her attention for months, would be there. They had met online through a website for vampire enthusiasts and occasionally communicated with each other. Jeremy created an online persona as a 30-year-old werewolf who craved blood. To support this claim, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, but the origin of the fluid was unknown. Despite his ambiguity, he seems to believe he is unique, a quality Jasmine finds appealing and interesting. Jeremy and Jasmine connection deepened after meeting at a concert. Jeremy, however, was 23 years old, and the duo knew her parents would not approve of their relationship due to their significant age difference. As a result, they decided to keep their romance a secret. Complications in Jeremy's life were made worse by problems he had experienced earlier. He struggled financially and resided in a trailer with his mother and sister. His relationship with his mother was strained, largely because of her heavy drinking. This often led to violent arguments with some of her hot-tempered partners, who often abused Jeremy in drunken fits. By the age of 13, Jeremy was struggling academically and had mental health issues due to a troubled home life. He became so overwhelmed that he tried to hang himself, but fortunately, someone intervened in time. He was later diagnosed with depression and hyperactivity. Due to the relentless bullying he faced at school, Jeremy decided to stop attending. As Jeremy navigated the dark period of his life, he developed a passion for the concept of live immortally and began exploring online forums, where like-minded people shared thoughts and ideas. His online profile was filled with morbid topics, including self-harm, pain, and violence. Unbeknownst to their families, Jeremy had started a dating relationship with Jasmine. Their friends were aware of the relationship, but they found it strange due to the large age gap. Everything remained a secret until Jasmine's parents, Deborah and Mark, discovered her excessive internet use and decided to monitor her online activity. What they found alarmed them. Jasmine was in contact with strangers, including Jeremy. He is someone with a suspicious online identity. His nickname, Soul Eater, and interests in dark themes raised concerns, leading Jasmine's parents to intervene and restrict her access to the computer. They were shocked to learn that Jasmine was in a dating relationship with Jeremy, making it clear to them that this relationship was not acceptable under any circumstances. Deborah and Mark took their daughter Jasmine to see a psychologist, hoping she would get the help she needed to escape her toxic relationship. The counseling sessions greatly improved their parent-child relationship, and Jasmine appeared to be returning to a normal life, claiming the past was behind her. She regained access to her computer. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a wrong decision and proved fatal for Jasmine's family. On the evening of Saturday, April 22, 2006, as the family prepared for bed, Deborah heard a noise in the basement and went to investigate. She initially thought the noise might be rats but discovered a person wearing a ski mask instead. The masked man stood opposite Deborah, and her first reaction was to scream. The stranger attempted to silence her by covering her mouth but was unsuccessful, prompting Deborah to scream even louder. The assailant then stabbed Deborah in the chest with a knife, twice. Mark, hearing his wife's desperate cries for help, rushed down to the basement. He was met with a horrific scene. His wife lay in a pool of blood, with the attacker standing nearby. Mark quickly responded by attacking the intruder. However, he was stabbed in the stomach and sustained additional stab wounds. As Mark's pain began to subside and he was losing consciousness, he quietly asked the attacker why he did that. The attacker coldly replied that it was because Mark's daughter had wanted it that way. Upstairs, Tyler was left alone and scared as the attacker approached. Tyler was still in his pajamas and was paralyzed with fear. The footsteps grew louder and the bedroom door opened. Just a few days before the murder, Jasmine was happy since her parents had forgiven her, allowing her to reconnect with them. Mobile phones weren't widely used at that time, so Jasmine used the computer to communicate with the outside world. As soon as she regained internet access, she immediately contacted Jeremy. She told Jeremy, "Everyone will think you and I are crazy, but there's one way we can be together, if my parents disappear." However, what Jasmine didn't reveal to her parents was that she was secretly forming a plan to kill them while she was receiving therapy sessions. She shared this plan with Jeremy. He found the idea appealing, but he stressed that everything needed to be carefully, meticulously planned and that attention to detail was required. Jasmine realized that as long as her parents were alive, she would never be able to be with Jeremy. During this time, Jasmine's friends noticed that she often complained about her parents, expressing her annoyance towards them. What they don't realize is that Jasmine's resentment eventually leads her to want to end her parents' lives. Despite her frequent comments about killing her parents, but her friends considered it just a funny joke. Garrett crossed the street to his friend Tyler's house on Saturday, April 22, in 2:06. He was excited to play, as the weather was pleasant. When he arrived at the Tyler's house, he noticed that the blinds were still closed, which seemed unusual. Even more unusual was that no one came to the door when he knocked. This surprised Garrett, as the Mark's car was parked in the driveway. Curious and hoping to find someone, Garrett peeked through the living room window but didn't see anyone. He then walked to the back of the house, towards the basement area where he often played with Tyler. As he looked through the window, he saw something strange on the floor, what appeared to be two people lying in a pool of blood. This disturbing discovery prompted Garrett to inform his mother. Garrett's mother seemed suspicious at first but decided to check on Tyler's family. They approached the house together, and Garrett pointed to the window he had looked through earlier. The woman peeked inside and was met with a horrific sight, immediately prompting her to call emergency services. "There's been an incident at the Jasmine's house," she reported. The police swiftly arrived at the scene and forcibly entered the house through the front door. They then proceeded to the basement. Due to the severity of their injuries and the large amount of blood, the police initially struggled to identify the bodies. However, despite the difficulties, they were eventually able to confirm that the victims were Mark and Deborah, and tragically, they had lost their lives. The crime scene was exceptionally horrific, with blood splatters covering the floor, walls, and ceiling. Later, during a thorough search of the house, the police found a young child in the upstairs bedroom. The boy was lying in bed, surrounded by toys also splattered with blood, and had visible knife wounds. A young boy's throat had been severely cut. As police searched the house, they realized that the Mark and Deborah's eldest daughter, Jasmine, was missing. This raised concerns for her safety. Initial investigations suggested that the attack occurred in the basement and the child's room, with the rest of the house appearing untouched. The condition of the boy's body indicated that the crime likely took place the previous night. It seemed that the perpetrator had broken into the house and attacked the boy and his parents. But what had happened to Jasmine, and where was she? The police developed several theories to explain her disappearance. One possibility was that she had managed to escape and was somewhere safe. Another possibility was that the perpetrator had taken her and was harming her. However, as the investigation continued, no clear answers emerged. Detectives turned to the media for assistance in locating the missing girl. Jasmine, hoping she would reach out or someone would come forward with valuable information. The investigation into the crime continued. Investigators interviewed relatives and friends of Mark's family and their colleagues to gather more detailed information about their lives. They sought to determine if the family had any enemies who could be capable of such a heinous act. However, upon further investigation, they learned that Mark's family was well loved and had no enemies. They were a loving family with a strong marriage and positive relationships with their children, except for one exception, their eldest daughter, Jasmine, who had been causing trouble lately. As a result, the media announcements shifted focus. The investigation now sought to locate the eldest daughter, Jasmine, a very suspicious person. The girl may have information about the case or might have been involved in it. Under Canadian law, which prohibits publishing the names of minors, so news outlets started referring to Jasmine Richardson as JR because she was underage at the time. After news of her relationship with Jeremy spread, this couple has become a wanted person by the police. The police initially focused on their friends and acquaintances. However, this line of investigation was ultimately unsuccessful, and the investigation reached a dead end. Police investigation revealed some new information. A few hours after the crime, Jasmine and Jeremy were seen at a restaurant and a party hosted by a friend. A friend noticed that Jasmine was fine, showing no signs of distress or trauma, and she continued to socialize, drink, and have fun. When friends asked how they managed to escape from her parents, Jasmine laughed and replied in a light-hearted manner. Jeremy and she took care of them. However, Jeremy's tone took a darker turn when he nodded in agreement, and then he added that he had cut them up like fish, implying a violent act had occurred. Jasmine's laughter downplayed the severity of the situation, making it seem less significant. The party guests burst out laughing, thinking that the remark was a sick joke. However, they did not realize that it was actually true. The guests' amusement was also verified by a comedian who was present. The police found a detailed plan in Jasmine's school locker, revealing her intentions to harm her family members with the help of her boyfriend. The photos of the suspects were widely circulated, and T is likely that they will be caught soon, as someone is expected to come forward with information about their whereabouts. Eventually, police received a tip and found Jasmine and Jeremy in Leader, Saskatchewan, about 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. They were found sleeping in a pickup truck and were taken into custody without a struggle. Jasmine and her boyfriend, Jeremy, were questioned individually, with Jasmine being interviewed first. She told investigators that she and Jeremy were deeply in love and that he reciprocated her feelings. However, their relationship was impacted by two main issues: a large age gap and disparate social status. Jasmine claimed that her parents would never have approved of their relationship. According to Jasmine, Jeremy ended the lives of her parents so that they could be together. When detectives inquired about her involvement in the crime, Jasmine denied being present at the time it occurred and stated she had no prior knowledge of the event. After she found out what had happened, she decided to run away with him because her love for Jeremy was so great. Detectives needed to identify the mastermind behind the plot. To get the suspect to cooperate, investigators came up with a clever tactic. They placed an undercover informant in Jeremy's cell, who successfully extracted information from him that contradicted Jasmine's claims. According to Jeremy, the plan to kill Jasmine's parents was actually she's idea. Jeremy was initially hesitant about going along with the plan. However, after realizing his own feelings for Jasmine, he agreed to it. Additionally, Jasmine's parents confiscating her computer as punishment also influenced his decision. Jeremy confessed to the informant. He took care of she parents, Deborah and Mark, while Jasmine took care of her younger brother, Tyler. Jeremy reveals that she desperately begged him to spare Tyler and come to her, and he was happy to get revenge on them all. Following Jeremy's confession, investigators questioned Jasmine using the recorded conversation between them and he as evidence, which left her no choice but to reveal every detail of the crime. She admitted that she stabbed her younger brother, Tyler, stating she didn't want to leave him behind as an orphan. In the following investigation, Jasmine and Jeremy voluntarily shared their social media profiles and passwords. By doing this, investigators were able to look at their private conversations and found thousands of messages that backed up Jeremy's previous claims. It became clear that Jasmine was indeed the mastermind behind the plan. Further investigation also uncovered a disturbing dynamic between Jasmine and Jeremy. Jeremy wrote that Jasmine was the only person who accepted and supported his unusual tastes, helping to alleviate the feelings of isolation he experienced due to not fitting in with societal norms. Fearing that he would lose her, he agreed to help carry out the horrific plan. One of Jeremy's messages contained a chilling passage, exposing his desire for violence. Jeremy wrote that he wanted revenge on Jasmine's parents and was determined to hold them accountable. His intention was to harm them and eventually make them disappear. Jeremy showed his affection for Jasmine in her time of need. However, his friends revealed a disturbing fact. Hours before the incident, Jeremy and his girlfriend had watched the 1994 film Natural Born Killers. This movie tells the story of a couple who brutally murder 9 people. Jeremy's friends stated that after watching the film, he expressed a desire to reenact a similar scenario with his girlfriend, calling it the best love story of all time. Based on the evidence collected, including witness testimony and the suspect's confessions, Jasmine and Jeremy, detectives were able to reconstruct incidents surrounding the crime. This led to the suspects being charged with 3 homicide counts. Jeremy was intoxicated before the incident. Jasmine allowed him into the house and led him to the basement, where he assaulted Deborah, Jasmine's mother. Deborah received 12 stab wounds, with the most severe wound penetrating 12 centimeters into her chest and damaging her heart, which ultimately caused her death. Jeremy then brutally attacked Mark, Jasmine's father, inflicting 24 wounds, 9 of which were on his back. Mark also bled to death on the basement floor. Meanwhile, upstairs Jasmine stabbed her younger brother Tyler 5 times. Then, Jeremy joined her. He coldly slit the boy's throat. Jeremy returned home to clean the blood off himself, while Jasmine took a taxi to a restaurant where they had agreed to meet. Once reunited, they discussed the incident of the night and then went to a party. Jeremy's friend, Casey Lancaster, helped them dispose of the evidence and evade authorities by fleeing to Saskatchewan. The brutality and gruesomeness of their actions are difficult to put into words. Jeremy and Jasmine committed their heinous crimes with ease and without emotion. What is even more disturbing is that during interrogation and detention, neither of them expressed any regret or remorse for their actions. While they were detained, Jeremy and Jasmine wrote letters to each other, referring to themselves as legendary and immortal. In one of these letters, Jeremy submitted a marriage proposal to Jasmine, which she happily accepted. Jasmine and Jeremy's intense relationship fell apart suddenly. As trial began, they blamed each other for their actions. Jasmine was the first to face trial in June 2007. She entered a not guilty plea, claiming that she was in a trance-like state at the time, which left her unable to intervene or stop Jeremy from killing her family. Jasmine also asserted that she only injured her younger brother, and Jeremy was the one who caused her younger brother's death. She made a statement that her conversations with Jeremy about killing her parents were just hypothetical discussions. But Jeremy took them seriously and pressured her into making them a reality. Jasmine received a 10 years prison sentence for 3 counts of homicide. However, due to Canadian laws regarding juvenile offenders, this was the maximum sentence she could receive as she was under 14 years old at the time of the crime. The primary goal of the sentence was to focus on healing and restoring the girl's mental well-being, rather than punishing her. In a 10-prison sentence, including 4 years in a psychiatric facility. During her stay, doctors diagnosed her with 2 conditions: conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. Jasmine showed genuine remorse for her actions in the years leading up to her release, which was noted by medical professionals during her community supervision. After serving her full sentence, Jasmine was released from prison in 2016 and has since been living in Canada under a new, protected identity. Her return to society has been met with mixed opinions, with some people supporting her right to a second chance, while others believe her punishment should have been more severe. The community in Medicine Hat has made it clear they do not want her to return. It remains to be seen whether Jasmine has truly changed and grown during her time in detention. Jeremy's trial began in 2008. He claimed that he had not initially intended to harm his girlfriend's parents, Deborah and Mark. However, after being discovered in the basement, he felt forced to attack. Jeremy denied harming Tyler and instead suggested that Jasmine was the one responsible. His defense argued that Jasmine had deliberately manipulated him into committing the crime, as she sought to escape her parents' strict control. Friends of Jeremy stated that he came to them before the crime. He confided in them his fear of losing Jasmine, to the point where he was willing to do anything to prevent it. Jeremy's lawyers asked the court to reduce the charges to manslaughter, suggesting that he was under the influence of substances at the time of the crime. When questioned by the prosecution about his motives, Jeremy gave an inconsistent response. He stated that when someone finds their soulmate, they will do whatever it takes to keep them. Throughout the trial, Jeremy remained largely unemotional, but broke down in tears when his mother, Jacqueline May, testified in his defense. Jacqueline felt guilty about the role she played in his upbringing, during which he was frequently physically and emotionally abused by her partners. In the end, Jeremy was found guilty of 3 counts of first-degree homicide and received 3 life sentences. He will be eligible for parole in 25 years, starting in 2033. Casey Lancaster's charges related to being an accomplice in a crime have been dismissed in a Medicine Hat court. However, she was found guilty of obstructing justice. As a result, She received a 1-year sentence of house arrest and was prohibited from using drugs and alcohol during her custody. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Mark Despain. On Wednesday afternoon, August 24, 2011, 33-year-old Michelle Despain left work to collect some urgent documents from home. She arrived back from the bank around 3 p.m. and noticed the back door was unlocked, which alarmed her. Upon entering, she found the house completely ransacked. Drawers were open, items were scattered everywhere, there was broken glass on the floor, some clothes were tossed in the bathtub, and a jewelry box was open in the bedroom. Then she made a horrifying discovery. Her husband Mark was lying unconscious on the kitchen floor. He had been shot and was bleeding. Frightened, Michelle screamed and ran outside. She called 911 and told them that robbers had broken into the house and shot her husband. The police then arrived at the scene of the crime. When the police and ambulance arrived, they found the house in complete chaos. At first, it appeared that a robbery had taken place. Doctors later confirmed that Mark had been dead in the kitchen. The medical examiner stated that Mark had been dead about an hour before the police arrived. He had 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest and one to the head. Burns to his skin indicated that he had been shot at close range. After a careful examination, the police suspected that the crime scene was staged. They discovered that on the day of the incident, Mark was at home, then had lunch with Michelle at a cafe. After lunch, they had ice cream and took some dessert home. Michelle then went back to work, while Mark returned home. The police questioned why the robbers executed Mark at close range, suspecting that this was a planned attack rather than a spontaneous act of violence during a robbery. The police started gathering detailed information about Mark Despain and his family. Mark began dating Michelle when she was 18 and he was 19, though they had known each other since school. Michelle had a young daughter from a previous relationship. Soon, they decided to live together, and Mark's parents bought them a trailer. Mark treated Michelle's daughter as his own and worked in the family business as an investor and real estate appraiser. As Mark's career advanced, he founded his own company and earned a substantial income. The couple moved from a trailer to a large, beautiful house with a swimming pool in a prestigious area of Jonesboro, Arkansas, USA. Michelle and Mark had 2 more children together, and their family of 5 appeared friendly, wealthy, and happy. They vacationed at expensive resorts several times a year, including trips to Mexico and Disneyland. Initially, Michelle was a housewife but later began helping Mark with his business and worked at a local bank. Despite Mark offering for her to stay home, she wanted to pursue her career. After Mark's suspicious death, Michelle became the prime suspect in the case. She was summoned to the police station for questioning. Michelle claimed that she had a solid alibi, as she was at work that day and only went home for work-related reasons, where she accidentally discovered her husband's body. Her alibi was confirmed by surveillance camera footage showing her returning to work after lunch at the time her husband was murdered. As a result, suspicions against Michelle were dismissed. The police interviewed neighbors, who mentioned seeing a suspicious black man driving an old blue Mercedes in the area on the day of the crime. Police considered whether Mark had any enemies or people who might have wanted to harm him. Some family acquaintances described Mark as a powerful and ambitious man who could have made enemies. A work check revealed that he was scheduled to work that day but suddenly decided to go hunting and stay home. Police spoke with Michelle again to clarify the timeline of events and possibly uncover new details they may have missed before. Michelle told police that she met Mark for lunch that day. They went to a coffee shop near the bank where she worked. After lunch, Michelle returned to work at 1:30 p.m. and returned home again after 2:30 p.m., where she found Mark murdered. This time, however, Michelle revealed new details. She said that when she saw Mark lying on the floor in a pool of blood, she approached him to check if he was still alive. Michelle shook Mark's leg and called his name, but he didn't respond, so she assumed he was dead. Michelle ran out of the house and called 911, then waited for the police to arrive. She called her mother, explained what had happened and asked her to come. When her mother arrived, Michelle was near her house, and the police and ambulance were already on the scene. The police asked Michelle if she knew anyone who might want to harm her husband. To everyone's surprise, she confidently named Mark's father, Jack. Michelle explained her reasons for suspecting him. Initially, when she and Mark got together, his parents seemed like good people. They even bought them a trailer to start their life and supported Mark in his work at his father's company for several years. However, after Mark became a successful employee, he wanted more responsibility and asked his father for a larger share of the company. His father refused, leading to a fallout between them. Mark then decided to leave and start his own company. Jack was upset about this, and since then, they hadn't communicated. Michelle realized that Jack was cruel and cold-hearted after getting to know her husband's parents better. Jack immediately disliked her daughter from a previous marriage, and a serious feud erupted between him and the 13-year-old. Jack also showed hostility towards Michelle herself, leading her to suspect he might harm Mark out of spite. Michelle's father shared her concerns, having encountered Mark's father while working for him and believing Jack capable of murder. He even heard Jack threaten his own son with violence, and they had a strained relationship due to a business dispute. The police took note of this information and began investigating the relationship between Mark and his father. They discovered that Mark and Jack had argued over money and the company years ago, leading to a strained relationship. However, it was unclear why the father suddenly decided to kill his son at this time. The police spoke to Mark's parents. The father confirmed the argument but mentioned that the money dispute started because of Michelle's influence. According to them, Michelle always wanted more and was never satisfied with their financial situation. Even though Mark made a lot of money, she insisted that he ask his father to transfer most of the company to him. During their arguments, it was clear that Michelle was to blame for everything. Jack said that they kept in touch with their son despite their arguments, but ignored Michelle. Shortly before the tragedy, Mark revealed his intention to divorce his wife. That day, Mark called Jack, asking him to stop by the house to buy hunting supplies. The father noted that only Michelle knew he would be home that day. Mark's mother mentioned that Michelle feared divorce because it would mean losing the finances and status she had enjoyed from Mark. Her parents advised the police to investigate Michelle's actions on the day of the murder further, suggesting that she may be more complex than she appears. The father suspected that she was involved in the case, perhaps not as a killer but as an organizer. Jack reported an incident that Michelle had mentioned to the police, involving a conflict with Michelle's daughter, Brooke. Jack discovered that Brooke was having a romantic relationship with her boyfriend and found several revealing photos on her phone. Jack warned her to end the relationship and stop taking such photos, and threatened to tell her parents. In retaliation, Brooke used Jack's phone to take topless selfies and sent them to her boyfriend, then told her mother that Jack had been harassing her and taking inappropriate photos. Michelle was furious when she found the photos on Jack's phone and accused him of taking them. Jack denied the accusations, and Michelle fought back, leading to a fight. After the incident, Jack's wife left him and filed for divorce, suspecting him of child molestation. Michelle reported Jack to the police, but the investigation revealed that Jack was not involved. It was confirmed that the photos were taken by Brooke herself. No charges were filed against him, and Jack's wife returned after the truth was revealed. However, the experience left a lasting negative impact on their relationship, damaging Jack's reputation and health. They decided to cut ties with Michelle and her daughter, allowing her to raise Brooke as she wished. Brooke later admitted that her mother had convinced her to take the photos to damage Jack's reputation, alienate Mark from his father, and their plan almost succeeded. Jack and his wife were not considered suspects because they had a solid alibi. They were on vacation in another city on the day of the murder. Based on a tip from Mark's father, the police turned their attention to Michelle. They wanted to understand why Michelle would kill her husband and what her motive might be. Michelle and Mark had shared 15 happy years together, raising 2 children and building a successful business. They lived a comfortable life without any financial worries. So why would Michelle kill her husband and risk losing the family's main source of income? Police quickly uncovered that Michelle was not the grieving widow she appeared to be. In reality, she was having an affair with a younger colleague who was 24 years old, a few months before Mark's death. She fully supported him financially, covering his apartment, groceries, and all bills with the money her husband earned. The police also learned that Mark had significant debt totaling about $2 million, despite his substantial wealth. Michelle was found to be taking money from her husband's business account, and it was discovered that Mark had 2 life insurance policies totaling $1 million. This new evidence further raised suspicions about Michelle, leading police to call her in for questioning. Police questioned Michelle about an affair with another man. She admitted to having a new romantic interest in a young man but insisted her husband was unaware of the affair. Michelle explained that their marriage had been troubled for a long time and they were discussing divorce. She planned to move out soon but denied any involvement in her husband's murder. Michelle argued that she had no motive to kill him, as he was a loving father and will pay a large alimony. Despite their suspicions, the police lacked concrete evidence against Michelle. Surveillance camera footage from the bank where Michelle worked confirmed her presence at work during the murder. The investigation hit a dead end. The case took a dramatic turn when police received information from a person who reported that someone was bragging about killing Mark Despain. The person was identified as Terrence Barker. Police investigated and discovered that Terrence's phone had been near Mark's home at the time of the murder. They also learned that a friend of Terrence owned an old blue Mercedes. When Mark's neighbors, who had seen the African American in the Mercedes, were shown Terrence's photo, they identified him. Police located Terrence and brought him in for questioning. Although Terrence initially denied any involvement, Terrence eventually confessed to shooting Mark. He revealed that a client had promised to pay him $10,000 for the murder, which was why he accepted the job. However, he refused to reveal the client's identity and claimed that he had not yet been paid for the murder. Terrence was arrested and charged with murder. Police found and questioned Johnny Hubbard, the driver of the blue Mercedes and Mark's friend. Police hoped Johnny would cooperate with the police and share information. Johnny was one of Mark's tenants and knew Michelle's father, Carl Kelly. Johnny agreed to assist the police and reveal everything. He explained that Carl had approached him about Mark's murder and would pay him money. Terrence knows about this plan and also wants to join to make money. They met Carl in a parking lot near the church to plan the crime. Their plan was for Terrence to shoot Mark. Even though Terrence did not know Mark, he agreed to join in for the money. As a result, Johnny was arrested and charged with murder. When Terrence found out about Johnny's testimony against him, he decided to reveal everything as well. He confirmed his friend's account and added that Carl gave him a gun near the church, which he used to shoot Mark. Carl showed them Mark's house and said they needed to wait for his command to carry out the murder. On the day of the crime, Terrence also revealed that not only was Carl involved, but his daughter Michelle was too. Michelle was the mastermind behind the operation, giving her father instructions over the phone. Her father helped her with everything and covered for her. Police reviewed the messages between Michelle and her father and discovered a text that exposed her involvement. At 8:20 a.m. on the day of the murder, she texted her father, "I can't live like this. "It's been a terrible morning." Her father replied, "Okay, you can take him out to lunch." The police believed that Michelle had arranged to meet Mark for lunch that day, which gave her father the chance to take Terrence into the house, hide there, and wait for Mark to return home so he could shoot him. Carl's phone records showed that he was present at the crime scene during the murder and played a role in the planning. An analysis of Michelle's communications with her husband on the day of the murder showed that she invited Mark to lunch. He initially refused because he was planning to go hunting, but she insisted and asked her husband to meet, and he eventually agreed. Throughout their lunch, Michelle kept in touch with her father via text message, informing Carl when they had finished eating and when Mark was on his way home. Michelle and her father were arrested. Michelle initially denied any involvement, but eventually confessed and claimed that her father was solely responsible for the crime. She said that her father had planned the crime, motivated by insurance money and a desire to take over the family business. However, the police were skeptical of her claim because she had sent her father a text message that morning urging them to kill. Carl eventually admitted his role in the crime. Michelle and her father, Carl Kelly, were charged with first-degree murder of Mark. The 4 people arrested in the case later agreed to plead guilty to the prosecution, which reduced their sentences but also prevented them from appealing the court's decision in the future. Mark's parents accepted the deal because they wanted to avoid a lengthy trial. Terrence Barker and Carl Kelly received sentences of 35 years each, Johnny Hubbard was sentenced to 18 years, and Michelle Despain received 30 years.